4, 3, 2. Hello, Andy.
What's up, Joe?
What's going on, buddy? We're here
Not much,
drinking
man.
CBD water. I've never had CBD water. GT's Kombucha sent us some CBD water.
My first sip was a few seconds ago, and I didn't read that it said cucumber basil, so I was shocked by the taste, but I like it.
Yeah, that's a weird combo, right?
Yeah.
Cucumber, and it's called Dreamcatcher, which makes me think of like a white trash lady living in a trailer park, one of them things hanging over her bed, right?
Partially broken on the inside.
Mullet, weird cats. If you have a dream catcher, most likely you have cats, right?
I think you have to have one.
It's part of the program.
Yeah, it's a package deal.
It's like, you know what I saw yesterday that is really rare? I saw a dude who was dressed up like a Native American who was not, in fact, a Native American. That's a risky move in this day and age.
Yeah, I'm not going to go there.
And when we were kids, you could be an Indian. Like, if you could play cowboys and Indians, you could be an Indian, and it'd be like, oh, okay.
Yeah, no problem.
He's the Indian. This guy's the cowboy. Normal shit. Today, they will fucking come for you.
That day's gone.
The day's over.
Yeah.
What happened?
I'm not smart enough to answer that question by a significant margin.
But some things have taken place. I mean, during the time that you were serving, from 2001 to 2019, where we're at today, I mean, there has been a significant change in outrage culture in this country, in entitlement, like things that people think that they can get offended by and not offended by, things that are important and not important. We're in the strangest time.
The beauty of that is most of the time I was serving, so I paid zero attention to any of it.
Right.
The disaster part of that is when you come off the off-ramp, out of service, and you go, what happened?
Yeah.
What happened to the environment that I left? But, I mean, I went from Santa Cruz, California, where I grew up, where it could well be the origin of outrage culture and social justice warriors, to the military, to back out of the military. So I had very different optics when it comes to perspective, where I started and then what I was seeing when I came out.
Well, that's the take that I always see from people that are in the military or have been in the military, is their understanding of what's important and not important is so much different because it's truly life and death.
Not all the time, but I think if you are exposed to that environment enough, it'll recalibrate your perspective of what's important and what's not.
Yeah. Did you ever read any Sebastian Junger?
I did.
Did you
Tribe
read
is a great book, yes.
Yeah.
I read that off your recommendation, actually.
Did it speak to you, like in terms of like your own personal experience?
It made complete sense. I probably would have used different terms in different places throughout, but the concept that he was talking about absolutely made sense. I mean, the SEAL teams, whether or not people live up to this, an argument could be made, but one of the key tenets is, the brotherhood, which is just another way of talking about a tribe.
Yeah. Yeah. I just felt like it was really interesting to me, like that book, that one of the most moving part of it was how connected these people are when they're together and when they're at war, and what that brotherhood, that camaraderie means to them, and how they feel disconnected when they're back in regular civilization and they get depressed. It's like their life had been led at such a high vibration, intensity, so much on the line. It means so much. Everything means so much. There's so much dedication, so much commitment. And then to go back to the regular life is very, very difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't think it would be unfair to say that some of the people that I served with, I probably have closer relationships than I do with my biological family. Even probably I've shared... I don't know. It's not that the things that we shared were important, but the value and our connection was so tight that, honestly, tighter than my definitely biological family and potentially even my wife as well too, and my own kids. And
Don't tell her that out loud.
I think she understands it. She gets it.
You're gonna get in trouble, bro.
I only get in trouble from my wife on days that end in Y, so nothing's going to be new about that. But I think she also understands that, because I certainly have struggled. I struggled quite a bit, but about the first 18 months I got out of the military. And I look back on it now and I think two pieces of it. One, I went from seeing those people that I share those experiences with on a daily basis. So there's that everything you have in common. We talk about stuff the same. I mean, I just know the ins and outs of those people, and then I became detached from them. And then I used to have what I thought was a job that had an immense amount of purpose, and then that was gone too. So I lost a little bit of my identity and a little bit of the purpose. And at that same time, like I said, I come off that off-ramp of being in the military, and I'm looking at the world. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. People are arguing about things and talking about how they're oppressed while they're standing in a Starbucks line paying for a coffee that costs more per ounce than a gallon of gasoline. Stuff that probably couldn't be, you could couch it in terms other than oppression, and none of it made sense. And it's rough when you get detached from that environment.
Well, especially in your situation, you were wounded, and although you wanted to continue serving, you physically weren't able to anymore.
I was for a while. So I got hurt in February of 2005. The 14-year anniversary was earlier this month. And it took me about 2 years to work my way back to where I would become operational again. And I did one more deployment after I got hurt. And then at the tail end of that deployment, that was just the end of it. My body wouldn't tolerate it anymore.
And this is because of the metal fragments, or what is it totally? There was a nerve damage?
It was so I got medically retired, which is not based off of any one instant, hopefully. I mean, people who they get an IED strike and they'll become a quad amputee or a triple amputee. That's one incident that they're going to get retired for. For me, it was more the culmination of a lot of things. So the gunshot wound obviously didn't help. And then the operational history of exposure to explosive blasts, the concussive forces, all of those things just kind of added up. I went through a 30-day protocol where they baselined me and took a bunch of tests and basically came to they write out a massive document of all the things that they were able to at least document. Like for me, I can't get an MRI because I still have metal in my body from ferrous metal from the round that clipped a piece of rebar on its way to me.
Oh, wow.
And it clipped my sciatic nerve on the way in, and they're concerned that if they image me, or what I've been told by the doctors, if they image me, it might react again with my sciatic nerve, just pull a piece of metal by it, and I'll be right back where I was. I had drop foot for about 6 months.
And drop foot is when your foot just stops working.
Totally hangs. I could always push down, but I couldn't lift it up.
That's a thing that's happening now in MMA quite a bit. It's happened several times where guys get low calf kicked, and there's something about chopping at the nerves behind the leg that guys' legs are just, their foot's going limp. It happened to Michael Chandler. It happened to Henry Cejudo.
Are they recovering from it?
Yeah. I mean, it's in the middle of the fight. So they get
it's just
kicked, and then
momentary.
the leg just stops working, and they can't stand on it. Their foot just literally doesn't react anymore.
So frustrating. So for me, I got shot in the hip, high up on my left-hand side. But by the time I made it to the hospital, my single complaint was my ankle. I was just telling them, I didn't remember falling on my ankle. I didn't remember hitting my ankle, but it felt like somebody had taken a sledgehammer and just beat it into powder. And so they were very careful, and then they cut my shoes off of me, they cut my pants off me, and the first thing they did was take an X-ray of my ankle, and they're like, "Dude, you're totally fine." But it felt like it was destroyed because it was the nerve that got interacted with high up. It short-circuited all the way down to the terminal point of the nerve. And for me, it never came back. I'm hoping that, obviously, for the fighters, it eventually comes back, because I had drop foot for 6 months to a year. I eventually was able to start dorsiflexing my foot again, but I still can't feel my left leg from the kneecap down on the sciatic side. The far left-hand side, and as it wraps over the top of my foot, is completely numb.
And is this because of the actual damage to the nerve, or something touching the nerve? They
don't know. That was an interesting part of being hurt as well, is talking to people who have decades of medical experience and having them look at you and go, "I don't know."
Fuck.
Yeah.
Especially without an MRI, right? Because they can't.
They can't, and because they're worried about it being pulled out. Same thing why the concussion history that I have, it's an estimate based off of operational history, because they can't throw me in that same machine and image my brain.
Oh, whoa.
Because it's spitting magnets. And
right.
I mean, there's metal all over the left-hand side of my pelvis, and I don't know how much it would have to move, but if it just clipped that nerve again, it was probably one of the more difficult times in my life. My leg felt like it was on fire 24 hours a day, which I could ignore during the daytime, but where it got me was at nighttime. I would lay down in bed, and it just felt like I had dipped my leg in gas and put a lighter onto it. So I was on high dosages of like gabapentin and Neurontin, which are central nervous system suppressors. So I started feeling the cognitive effect of that. So I backed myself off of that. Wasn't in a great phase of my life. So I was, of course, washing those down with massive amounts of alcohol, taking 3 to 4 Ambien, staying awake because my tolerance to all that stuff was so high. And the last thing I ever want to do is go through that again. So I'm going to stay away from the spinning magnets and just...
Jesus.
Because, I mean, it might be a quarter of an inch, and I'd be exactly right back where I was before.
And there's no way they can go in and pull those fragments out?
So I'm laying in the hospital in Baghdad. And the night that I got hurt, many other people got hurt. 8 people got hurt on that particular target. I was one of the least injured. There were people who immediately flown into surgery. A guy almost lost his arm. A guy he was right next to an explosive blast that literally peeled back the layers of his ballistic helmet. He was conscious but blind. He'd taken such a shot to his head. He got ejected out the backside of a building. There was some other gunshot wounds. So I'm laying in the hospital bed. I hadn't taken any morphine because I had watched too many movies, and I thought I had auto-injector Surrettes on me at all times, but I thought if I had jabbed myself, I was going to start drooling. No experience with whatsoever. And the doctors finally start working on me, and he says, all right, we're going to take a look at this. I'm going to basically stick my finger in the hole. And I was like, let's take a pause here, sir. Can I have some pain medication? So he comes out and just juices me with morphine. First time I've ever had it I wish I would have taken it in the field. It did almost nothing. And they played around a little bit with the holes and then slid me into an x-ray machine and said, do you want us to try to take this out? And I said, well, what is that going to entail? And he said, well, because we can tell that there's ferrous metal in here, what we would do is we would knock you out, put a tube down your throat, lay you on your stomach, and hold up a 2-dimensional x-ray and basically just start slicing and pulling apart, looking and searching for these metal pieces and pulling them out of your body one at a time. And I said, is there another option? He's like, oh, yeah, totally. The body will encapsulate it in calcium, and as long as it's not touching a bone, you're probably going to be fine. What the fuck, man? Why didn't you lead with that option?
Right. Well, did they think they were going to be able to get them all out, though, if they did go in there and start slicing away?
I don't know. And I don't know what benefit it would have had. I suspect it would have caused more damage than the actual injury itself. My hip is fine. I still have never had a surgery. I've still never broken a bone. The only thing they ever did was put a gauze pad on my leg, and when the scab fell off, I could start taking a bath again if I wanted to.
Wow.
Yep. They just left everything in there.
Jesus. That's crazy. It's all covered.
It was bizarre.
Wow. So if you do have an injury now, is it a lot of guesswork? Like if something's wrong with your leg, do they have to like go in there with a scope? Like since you can't get an MRI, like what if you blew your knee out?
They would have to rely on imagery technology that doesn't revolve around magnets.
Wow.
So most likely, I think they gave me a CAT scan in the hospital, so that I don't think is magnet-based, and then 2-dimensional x-ray.
Well, it's interesting, too, because some of the therapies they're using on people for TBI is...
magnets.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're as powerful as an MRI. I mean, you can't even wear earrings in those rooms.
Well, yeah, with an MRI.
Yeah.
I had heard about some kid who accidentally died because they had an oxygen tank in the room, and they turned the machine on, and the tanks slammed into him and crushed him.
Yeah. I've heard about the TBI magnets. That I think I would be fine with because I don't think it has the power that the huge machines do.
Right. It's like a low frequency magnetic pulse. That's like Kat Zingano, who's a UFC fighter. She essentially she had been hurt and really bad in a fight with Amanda Nunes, and she got hypothyroid condition from that fight. Her thyroid wasn't functioning correctly. She was gaining weight like crazy. Her motor skills were all fucked up, and they fixed her with that.
And that was from the brain injury?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For a fight she won, which is crazy. I mean, she was hurt really bad in the first round, stopped her in the third round. She won the fight. She beat Amanda Nunes and, really suffered some significant brain trauma from that fight.
There is I don't want to say there's a rash of suicides in the SEAL team specifically. Obviously, the number 22 is thrown out a lot when it comes to veteran suicides, but that's...
What is it, 22%?
22 veterans a day commit suicide. Is the number that is often touted. I'm hesitant to say that number is accurate because if you look at how it was derived, it wasn't. They could have done a better job of getting that number. And and I don't want to say inside of the SEAL teams that there's a suicide issue, even though I do know a few people that have committed suicide, and they were the ones that I would least expect it from, but they were also the ones who had quite a bit of high operational tempo. And the one thing that I don't think, especially in the military medicine world, they understand well is traumatic brain injury and the impact it has long term.
Yeah.
And how easy it can be. Because you know this, I've heard you talk about it before. You don't have to get knocked out to get a brain injury.
Right.
And I know countless times where I either did something dumb or was just standing in the wrong place or had a hard parachute opening and I cracked my head against the metal risers and your head hurts for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And I've seen the change in behavior in some people, and I know the stuff that's tied to it as well, the low hormones, all of that stuff. That is happening, I think, at the highest levels in the military, probably military-wide, but specifically those people who are kind of more on the front leading edge of combat operations. And I think as a country, we're in a total unknown area because we're in a sustained period of war longer than we've ever been as a nation, and nobody knows the outcome of that. And people who I would have never guessed would make the decision to take their own life, I'll get a text and, hey, so-and-so just went out into the woods. And no other external injury, no other marker than obviously something happened in the geometry between their ears that caused them to make that decision. And I suspect it's from the repeated exposure to the brain injury.
Yeah, it's something that people are just starting to understand over the last couple of decades. I mean, obviously, there was a focus of that concussion movie, and, I don't know if you saw that Bob Costas was actually pulled from football, and they had told him that he'd crossed the line.
The announcer, Bob Costas?
They pulled him. They pulled him from doing, what event was it? Was it from the Super Bowl?
I think so, yeah.
Because he was talking about traumatic brain injury and the realities of it. And they said, you crossed the line. He's like, I crossed the line by talking about reality? Like,
in an honest and open person. Yeah, that's not cool.
I mean, that's what he does. I mean, that is Bob Costas' entire hook. But, I mean, he's a brilliant guy. But this problem was so poorly understood just 2 decades ago. So everyone's just sort of coming to this realization that, I mean, according to Dr. Mark Gordon, who I've had on, who works with the Warrior Angel Foundation, Andrew Marr's set up, where they're helping all these veterans that have traumatic brain injuries, and I've had Mr. Gordon on several times. He says that you can get traumatic brain injuries from things that don't even remotely knock you out. He's like, people get them from doing moguls when they ski. They get them from
your brain just rattling.
They get them from jet skis, bouncing around on jet skis. I mean, you can get it from a minor car accident. You can have a traumatic brain injury. And for guys like me that got hit in the head for years, who knows what the fuck is going on in there? And for professional fighters, it's almost inevitable. For football players, it's even worse. For football players, they did some crazy study, and I know we quoted it, and I don't remember what the numbers was, but it's some insane number, like in the high 80% of people from high school on through college and into the professionals have TBI or CTE or some signs of traumatic brain injury.
I'd be surprised if they didn't, given their
fucking crazy.
It is interesting too. Like I was saying, so when I got medically retired, they sent me to a medical facility called NICO, which is attached to Walter Reed, and it's the best care that I ever received because it's a civilian facility. It's called the National Intrepid Center of Excellence.
We did a lot of work with them back in the day for the UFC. The UFC raised a bunch of money for that.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, the money was well spent because I went there and I probably would not have been medically retired had I not, because I left with literally a 150-page dossier. But it's interesting tying it back to TBI because I spent a lot of time as a requirement talking to psychologists and psychiatrists. And the TBI PTS in the military, it gets interesting because it seems like they're treated as different issues. And I'm probably misquoting the number a little bit. I think there's 13 recognized symptoms of both, but there's an overlay of like 11. So I can't remember any of the symptoms off the top of my head, but you could describe one and it could apply both to TBI and to post-traumatic stress. So it gets even more muddled on how, are you treating somebody for a brain injury? Are you treating somebody for a post-traumatic stress? Are you lumping everybody together? It's just because I see a lot of people, and specifically a lot of veterans, getting stuck in that world where it's a lot of focus on PTS, but the reality is it could just be from the trauma received over a career or, nearly 2 decades for most people to make it to retirement. It's really hard to tell.
Well, apparently blasts are a big one, right? Like blowing down doors and things like that. Even if you just step away and you brace yourself, the impact of just the air, the concussive force of it is just devastating for your brain. The human brain apparently is just so much more delicate and sensitive than anyone could have ever guessed.
Well, and concussive blasts are a tough one because they travel. So if you're internally in a building and you find a door that's at the end of a hallway, even if you go all the way down to the end of the hallway and around the corner, the blast can still get you because it will come down off the door, reflect off of the hallway, and still rock you.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's I thought I had a good hiding spot more than once and did not have a good hiding. You sit there just bing, like, oh, that hurt.
Oh.
More than one occasion. Or you're working with a bunch of assholes who take all the good hiding spots. You're like, God damn it. Just turn around and just ball up.
And there's not really much you can do about that, right? I mean, if you have to blow down that door, someone has to be there to detonate, and you have to be close enough for it to activate, right? How are they doing it? Wirelessly?
They might be doing it wirelessly now. When I was in, it was called Nonel, and it basically it's a shock tube. So you put a charge wherever, a gate, a door, a wall, and you basically have to attach an initiator to it because the charge isn't going to go off by itself. So you need a highly reactive charge to set off an explosive that is less reactive. You keep them separate, obviously, for safety, except for the main breacher. He probably has at least one hooked up so he can be really fast. But then you just extend that flash tube, and they come in long reels. I mean, you can get 30, 40, 50 feet. And each charge, mathematically, we do math on it to determine the minimum safe distance of every charge, and it's written on the charge so you know how far you can get away. But sometimes you're in a situation where, like I said, you think you got an awesome hiding spot, and the guy lays out the flash tube and he's getting ready to fire it off, and you realize that you're staring directly at the charge and you have nowhere to hide.
Oh, Jesus.
And they're not going to wait on you. So it's turn around, cover up into a ball, and eat it.
Oh, is there a best way to eat it?
Open your mouth and cover your ears. I mean,
really?
Yeah.
Open your mouth.
Yeah, it's instead of overloading like your sinus cavities and your ear canal, so you can cover your ears and open your mouth. It helps. If something's going to go off really close to you.
Open your mouth and cover your ears.
Yep.
What's the difference between opening and closing the mouth?
The effect of the wave, my understanding, the contained pressure inside of your body, as opposed to giving it an avenue to escape.
Jesus Christ. One of the things they're realizing apparently about concussions is that even just getting hit in the chest can give you a concussion.
From the whip of the head?
Because you get hit in the chest and you're like, I didn't even get hit in the head. Yeah. But just getting hit in the chest makes your head snap and it makes your brain swoosh around inside your head, and that's what gives you an injury.
I just remember earlier on, I mean, like in the mid-2000s, it wasn't – the only question was, does your head hurt? Like that was the beginning of whether or not you might have sustained a concussion. And then obviously learning much more now and where we're at, it's like, yeah, you may not have even had any sensation in your head, but,
It's kind of crazy when you think about how long people have been studying the human body, and this is just something they've really got a real understanding of in the last couple of decades.
I don't even know if I would characterize it as a real understanding. I think they're farther along than they were two decades ago, but I think the amount we know versus the amount that we don't know is much more weighted on the amount we don't know.
Yeah. I went to a high school football game recently because my daughter was doing this cheerleading thing, and I watched these kids collide with each other, and I'm like, oh, me, a fucking fight commentator,
Yeah.
And I'm watching this, I'm like, get out of there, stop doing it.
Yeah.
It's just, to me, I don't know. I guess I get that people enjoy the game. I understand it. I mean, I think there's a lot of things in life. I mean, I'm talking to you, the world record squirrel suit flying jump man. When I talk about risk and reward, maybe you're the wrong person to discuss this with. But,
I think my risk versus reward.
Well, it's worked out for you.
So far.
You're here.
Today.
Yeah, I mean, you're jumping off fucking mountains with a flying squirrel suit. If you're here, you've obviously got it nailed.
I'm on pause for the base jumping for the time being.
Did Mrs. Stumpf step in and put the kibosh on it?
For the first time, she asked me to stop in June of last year. But, of course, it was tied to a very close friend who did a jump, didn't go the way he wanted it to go, or anybody would. She happened to know him, and it really was the first time that I seriously considered giving it up. I haven't touched a wingsuit since my buddy Alex died. And he was my main base jumping partner overseas on most of the trips that I'd done. And I'm not going to say I shepherded him into the sport, but I was there with him on his first jump off of a cliff in Italy, the first time he put a wingsuit on. And it's that one stung a bit. So it's on pause, potentially forever as far as base jumping goes. I'll still skydive, but it's a question mark on the base jumping side of the house.
So fun. You do such risky shit. The skydive, I was like, yeah, skydiving. That's no big deal. I'll skydive. I'll jump out of a fucking plane.
That I would do with my eyes closed every day. That's the high risk ratio on that one is we're all set.
What is the risk ratio on skydiving? Like what percentage of those things go wrong?
It's incredibly low. So that you have a main parachute and a reserve parachute. I don't think there has been a true double failure, meaning your main parachute malfunctions, you cut it away properly, and deploy your reserve parachute and have that also fail in 20-some years. People die skydiving all the time. Well, not all the time, because I guess the population of people that do it is not huge. But I would say the vast majority of people who die skydiving, they kill themselves. They make a poor decision. And most people who die skydiving die under perfectly functioning equipment.
Really?
So the canopy size, the main canopy that you're flying, the wing over your head, the smaller it is, the faster it goes, the faster it descends, but also, quite frankly, the more fun it is. But with fun, there's consequence. So there are canopies that you can initiate a turn, and if you initiate the turn too low, you cannot pull the canopy out of the turn. You will impact the ground at a high rate of speed regardless of what you do. And if you get under that canopy with not enough experience, obviously your odds of making a bad decision are going to go through the roof. So most injuries and fatalities, at least from the stuff I have seen, is from people making poor decisions under good equipment or choosing to execute an emergency procedure, which would be cutting away your main parachute and deploying reserve, either out of sequence or doing it too low where the reserve parachute doesn't have time to open. To me, that's not a failure of the parachute system. That's the failure of the individual who is driving that parachute system.
So if you have a main parachute and you jump out and you hit the main parachute and there's a malfunction, how do you cut it off to get the other one?
So there's two pillows, one on each side. Mm-hmm. The right-hand side, you literally need to do this in the correct order, even though people have killed themselves by going backwards. So you pull to full arm extension. It's literally just a pillow with Velcro that has two cables, and the cables are what's actually holding the parachute on your shoulders. If you pull that out, a 3-ring release system, which is basically just a load reduction system, unwinds itself and your parachute's gone, and you're going back into free fall, and you just pull the other pillow. It sounds worse than it is, and before I had my first cutaway, it was terrifying. And then after you have 4 or 5, you're like, okay, I got this.
You had 4 or 5 main parachutes fail?
I think I'm at about 7
Jesus Christ, Andy Stumpf.
Well, I've been jumping for 20 years.
I don't want to hear that, man.
I started jumping in 99. Statistically, I'm actually, I think, under. I think it's like 1 in every 888 jumps, you'll have a malfunction or a gear failure. It's honestly, like your first one is an emotional experience.
I would imagine. What was the first one?
Deploying a parachute and just sitting there looking at it as it's, because they want to open, and I can tell now within an instant of trying to deploy my parachute whether or not it's going to open or not, just by looking at the shape, by sometimes listening to it, and just seeing how it opens. Sometimes, so packing a parachute people think is really difficult. If you can fold a t-shirt, you can pack a parachute. Sometimes, though, you just get off of a jump and you only have 10 minutes to make the next jump. So you skip a few steps or you rush through a few steps.
Is that what happened with you?
Potentially. I may have skipped all of the non-essential steps and a few of the essential steps to get the parachute.
Really?
Yeah. I was just rushing, and I didn't have a lot of experience, so I was stuffing the thing in there. And when I tried to deploy the parachute, it was asymmetrical. So sometimes it'll open and it'll start spinning, and then you're flying with your back to the. That would be considered an exciting moment, I would say.
So what happened with you? What exactly went wrong?
It just came out asymmetrically. The parachute wasn't opening.
And were you spinning?
No, I wasn't. I actually was able to recognize just by it should come out. It looks like a rectangle more than anything. But if you look like a rectangle that's twisted, there's no way to fix that.
No way.
So just get rid of it. And that's what I did. I looked up and I said, okay, that's not going to work. reach, pull, and your reserve opens so fast. Like by the time I had pulled the reserve handle, because I had a handle at that point, by the time I had moved my arm to 3/4 of extension, it had fired off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude.
But the difference, and you were asking, the difference, like why is risk skydiving lower? It's because you have time, thousands of feet. Whereas base jumping, you might have hundreds. Or if you're really pushing the envelope, you might have sub 10 feet because you're flying close to the ground as fast as you can go.
Did your friend Alex, who died, did he die base jumping? Or
he died wingsuit base jumping, something that he was my main base jumping partner.
What is the difference between wingsuit base jumping and regular base jump? Regular base jumping, you just have a quick deploy parachute, right?
So you have one parachute system when you
Right.
base jump instead of two, because there is not time for a reserve to open. So that is just taken out of the system.
Right.
So you pack your primary or only parachute very similar to a reserve. It's designed to open rapidly. It's designed to take a lot of load. So base jumping is just jumping off of a static object. Base stands for building, antenna, span, or earth. So four types of object. The addition of the wingsuit is really the only difference, which allows you to, like for myself personally, I'm not a huge fan of jumping off buildings and cliffs without a wingsuit because I don't like being from me to that flag when a parachute opens. Because if it doesn't open exactly in the direction you want it to, you better be Johnny on the spot or you're going to have a fucking problem. So it's, to me, if you have enough altitude, you put a wingsuit on, in 2 or 3 seconds, the suit is mocking forward. So then you're hundreds, if not thousands of feet away from the object. Then your parachute can open up however you want it to.
Have they made any improvements in the technology of this stuff since you first started jumping?
Huge improvements. I mean, the first wingsuits were literally just fabric that had like the little thumb loops you'll find on like cold weather long sleeve shirts sometimes. Seriously. Like Patrick
That's how you kept it on?
That's how they kept it on. I didn't jump any of those goddamn things. But, I mean, I think Patrick Desjardins is how you say his name. He was one of the first, and they would just sit there and they would just jam their appendages and lock them out and use their entire musculature to sail this fabric as far out as they could get.
Fuck.
And then the suits now are unbelievable. So each wing, like the wing between your legs and the wing between each of your arms, so there's 3 of them, they're totally independent. They have a ram air opening. So the air rushes into that and makes the wing semi-rigid, so it reduces the stress on your body. And their flight characteristics are insane. You can get the suit flying faster. You can fly it flatter. You can float. Everything about it is improved, except for the decision-making process of the monkey who's actually jumping it.
That's the original one, Jamie?
Oh, that guy's dead for sure.
It says Manus Mickey Morgan wearing
He is
a
100% dead.
Batwing suit. Is that ridiculous? Well, who was the first fucking psycho that thought that this was something that they should try?
It could potentially
Look at
have
this
been
asshole. Oh my God. This guy's like, he looks like he's living in the 1800s. When did they invent these fucking things?
I don't know. I know one of these guys died going off the Eiffel Tower in an exhibition.
This is 1900 right here.
1900? What in the fuck? Look at that guy.
Strong.
You know what, man? If you were living in 1900, you'd probably be like, listen, let's just get this over with. Fuck living in 1900. Everyone has syphilis.
Yeah.
Fucking whiskey's illegal. I'm just jumping off.
Look at that.
That is crazy.
So
When you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, honestly, I'm not going to lie. I would probably jump that out of an airplane.
1895.
Yeah.
Oh, he's the inventor. Earl Stein. He died in the first attempt. Oh, Jesus Christ. He died in the first attempt. Honor to a modern hero. All right, settle down.
But here's the thing, Joe. There's like 60-some people who are associated with the modern-day wingsuit and testing and evaluating to get it to this point. Mm-hmm. They're all dead.
All of them are dead.
Every one of them.
Jesus.
But that suit, like, I mean, that suit and the difference between that and where we are now, like, it's night and day.
But everyone involved in the creation of these wingsuits died in a wingsuit.
Yep.
Fuck, man.
Yep.
That is not good. Like, there wouldn't be a whole lot of black belts in jiu-jitsu if everyone who got to a certain point died. You know what I'm saying?
It's hard to justify or rationalize the behavior for sure. I'll be the first person to admit that.
What is it? Like, what is it about?
So that's
this
Dean
guy
Potter.
jumped with his dog.
That's Dean Potter jumping with his dog.
Oh, the poor dog.
So the
It's
dog,
not the dog's fault.
The dog, I believe, that looks like Switzerland.
Crazy asshole fucking owner.
So Dean was insane, right? He was a world-class rock climber. He's also dead from jumping a wingsuit. He died in Yosemite. It's, like I said, the technology advances. I was not there the day that Dean died. I've talked to people who have looked at it as to the conditions that led up to it. And one thing people generally don't want to do is place the responsibility on the individual making the choice. But from everything that I have seen, he made a choice to jump at a time when he should not have been jumping due to visual conditions. So even though the suits are amazing, really the only thing that doesn't seem to be evolving is the person that's jumping it. Most of the time, just like skydiving, it's just a human being making a very poor choice, to include Alex.
What is it about people, and I mean particularly people like yourself, that love these thrills? Like, what are you getting out of that? What are you getting out of that other than this mad adrenaline rush? I mean, what is it? Like, what motivates you to keep doing that?
So if I look back at it objectively, I think when I initially started pushing hard down that path, I was trying to replicate a headspace or a feeling or a sensation that I had in my old job. So if you want to talk about clarity of thought, and I think we might have talked about this the very first time that we sat down, stripping away all ancillary bullshit that has absolutely no meaning, but for me at least, I spend 99% of my time worrying about things that have no impact whatsoever.
Right.
So you're sitting on a helicopter, pick the battle space that you're in, and you get a 5-minute warning. And you really stop worrying about whether or not you have enough money in your checking account to cover your mortgage. And then you get a 3-minute warning. And then you kind of stop worrying about whether or not you just had an argument with your wife or you just sent off some snarky email. Then you get a 1-minute warning and a 30-second warning. And the closer and closer and closer you get, everything is gone. And it is still to this day the sensation and state that I have been in that is by far, I had no question about my purpose, and I had the utmost clarity that I've ever experienced in my life. And you get used to operating in that headspace of just being in the moment. The first 1 to 3 seconds in front of you, nothing else matters. I'm going to solve this problem and move on to the next one. This problem and move on to the next one. Well, then I lost that ability to do that. And it sucked because I liked operating in that headspace because it helped me deal with all the other bullshit in my life because it reset for me my what matters and what doesn't matter ratio. I was able to get rid of I would describe it as just the white noise in my head. Or another way I'll describe it is like Jamie's got a bunch of levers that he can push up. I think in this, I'm included in this, I think most people are pegged out at a 10 almost all the time. They're fucking white knuckling through life. But if you can get into that state where you have that clarity of purpose, clarity of focus, I felt like it pulled everything back to a 3. And so that state helped me in things that had nothing to do with that activity, and it lasted for a long time. So when you're base jumping and you're standing on a cliff and you're scared out of your mind and you can't talk because your mouth is so dry and you have a pee ring on your suit, which is why you always get dark suits so people can't see your pee ring. And every alarm bell in your body is telling you don't jump. And I had the same experience. I wasn't worried about the checking account. I wasn't worried about what was going on in life. I was just living in that moment. And it helped me be a better dad. It helped me be a better husband. It helped me be better at any business decision that I need to make because it allowed me to pull all of those stereo levers back down. So it's less for me, and I can only speak for me, it's less about thrill seeking because I get that all the time. Like, you're an adrenaline junkie. I'm like, I'm an adrenaline enthusiast. I certainly enjoy that, but I actually like what I get from the activity more than the activity itself.
What do you think is going on where people are pegged at 10 all the time with nonsense, and that something that's life-threatening can bring it back to a 3 and offer clarity? I mean, there has to be something that you've discussed or thought about in depth.
I just think it helps you Control, Alt, Delete your hard drive a little bit. It helps by not having, like when I'm standing on a cliff right before I get ready to jump, there is absolutely nothing that I am thinking about other than where I want to be in the next 3 seconds. And by being able to focus on something so singular, and maybe I don't meditate, but I've heard people talking about by being able to clear your mind, it helps them deal with everything else. I think there might be some connection there. But I just think that the removal of the noise that bombards everybody all day long, even for a little bit, helps you. It's you have iPhone and headphones for sure, right? Mm-hmm. And you ever notice, like, when you're listening to it, you listen at the same volume level, but then it just doesn't seem to be as loud. So what do? You click it up a notch, right? And then you get used to that volume level, and then you click it up a notch, and then you get used to that volume level. And receptor downgrade phenomenon. Your body gets used to it, so it adapts to it. But if you pull that stimulus out and leave it at that high volume, but listen to it like 2 weeks later, it's going to blow your ears out. It'll seem louder. It's not going to blow your ears out, but it's going to seem much louder than it would if you slowly just incrementally started adding that volume. So there's something in there that is allowing me, and I'm not recommending that anybody pursue therapy via the directions that I do, but there's something in there that's allowing me to, instead of add and add and add and add, that activity allows me to detach, and then when I come back to it, I realize, it just feels different for me. I don't know if that's a good description of the mechanism, but that's the best that I can probably describe it.
Well, I know a lot of veterans come back and really get involved in martial arts. Martial arts apparently is good for along the same lines, the same sort of noise reduction.
Yep.
Especially jiu-jitsu, when someone's trying to strangle you and you're fighting for your life and they're mounting you and trying to lapel choke you.
I'm familiar with this now.
Yes,
I'm
you're doing
6
it now.
months in.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about, being strangled or choked or having a huge person lay on your chest and just
like
try
Dudley.
to breathe. Oh, my God.
He's lying about being 220.
He could have said 219. I'm not even sure.
He's lying. I'm 200 pounds. He's fucking 18 feet taller than me. There's no way.
Yeah.
This just it doesn't even make sense.
Well, I don't have enough experience with jiu-jitsu to truly speak about the long-term benefit, but what I can say is this. If I stop base jumping, what I will replace that activity with is more jiu-jitsu, because what you just described, when somebody is literally, when you're simulating murder,
yes,
right, in your pajamas, and somebody is trying to choke you to death,
yeah,
you are not thinking about anything else.
About anything else. One thing that I do that's weird is I have songs playing in my head.
Well, you also probably have a few more reps than most people, so you can have that capacity for songs in your head.
But they're weird songs, like Christina Aguilera, I Am Beautiful. Like sometimes that'll be playing if I'm rolling. But the song, it's almost like, it sounds strange. I never talked about this before, but it's almost like a mantra. Like I'll play certain parts of the song over and over again in my head so that I can think about that instead of the actual training and the actual strangling.
But you also have, I don't want to use the term mastered because I don't know if you could master it, but where you are at like when you roll with somebody, I was talking with somebody about this not too long ago. When I roll with a black belt, the outcome is preordained, right? Unless they bought their black belt at Macy's and are pretending. In which case, I don't know. I still don't know enough. It might be preordained. But the difference in what I am thinking about versus what would happen if you and I rolled and what you are thinking about is going to be massive. So I don't have the hard drive space to sing Christina Aguilera.
Yeah.
And you probably don't even remember half of the things that you do when you roll or how you think about it because you have experienced it so many times.
The weirdest thing about jiu-jitsu and training, and you could say this about striking as well, is sometimes things happen and you didn't even think about doing them, you just did it. Those are the weirdest moments. Like there's sometimes where you'll kick somebody. Like someone will move and you'll move, and then before you know it, you're like, wow, I didn't even think about throwing that, and it lands. It's like your brain recognizes, oh, I know what happens here. You step to the left and throw that left kick, and it just lands. You just know where to go. And then the same thing happens with jiu-jitsu. Like sometimes there's a scramble, and in the scramble, all of a sudden you're choking somebody. It's like this movement happens, and your body just falls into place.
I'll let you know if I ever experience that particular.
Well, it doesn't happen all the time. It's just there's moments where you're like, particularly if you do a lot of drilling, which I don't know how much drilling you're doing, but it's one of the things that it made me way better. When I first started training with Eddie Bravo, one of the things that we did a lot from white belt to blue belt time was a lot of drills, just constant drilling. And drilling is overlooked and underappreciated because sparring is so fun. So like if you and Jamie were both learning together, you would do a few drills. Okay, here's how you do the arm bar. You're going to secure the arm. You're going to swivel the hips, throw the leg over, and tap. Good. Okay, now your turn. And you do it over and over again. That's fun. That's fun. Okay, now spar. You're like, all right.
But take it easy, guys. Work on the technique.
Yeah, exactly. Take it easy, guys. Work on the technique. But if you can spend more time drilling and less time rolling, you'll be way better at rolling. The whole idea is to just carve these paths in your mind. You know, and then you when you see someone who like hits a perfect Imanari roll, like that is not the first time they've done that. You know, there's so many like super high level guys now that you could watch on YouTube, and you can watch them execute these techniques.
Yeah.
And the thing that you're seeing more than anything is like how fluid everything is and how easily everything flows, because there's so much efficiency in their movement because they've done it over and over and over. But drilling is everything, and it's the thing that people do the least of.
So I go when I'm home. I go 5 days a week, and I go to So you met Travis today. Awesome. He's the owner of SBG Kalispell, which is where I train. I mean, I couldn't have planned it better. It's like 4 miles from my house.
That's amazing.
In the middle of not the middle, the northwest corner of Montana. To have that there is unbelievable.
How far are you from Bozeman?
As the crow flies, maybe 200 and some miles, but the drive there is like an L. It's not straight. It takes
go
about
through
6
the
hours.
mountains, duck the grizzly bears.
Yeah, swerve past.
Have you seen any grizzlies since you've been moved there?
No.
But they're fucking everywhere. They're waiting for you.
I don't leave my house.
Shit.
I don't like to.
Really?
You know, I just hang out with myself, have conversations, and go to jiu-jitsu. But I do an hour, and a lot of it is just drill base for that hour, and then there's an open mat afterwards.
Oh, okay.
So I feel like I'm getting a mix of both. And for me, I'm at the phase, like I'm such in the alphabet phase. I'm like A, B, B, like we'll put letters together into words later. And when I roll, I just tell myself, you know, maybe just focus on the fundamentals. You don't need to create new techniques in the middle of a roll.
That's true.
And I try to relax and use zero strength because I am bigger than most people that are there. And I've heard enough times that if you rely on your attributes early on, what's going to end up happening is you'll have success early, and then you're going to nosedive and so I'm just trying to go the other route. Just be as calm as possible, use as little strength as possible, and just tap early and tap off. It's my favorite move.
Yeah, another good thing to do is work off your back because you're a big guy.
That's where I started. I actually asked, I said, can you just teach me the worst position ever? And I'll try to build up from there. And I don't care about offense. I'd rather learn defense.
That's very intelligent of you. That's something that a lot of people don't do, and I certainly didn't do. I was just trying to choke people quick. Like, what could I do? You know?
I don't have much success choking people.
But if you can get really comfortable with your defense, it's the most important thing. Like Rickson Gracie, he's always said that. He's like, the most important thing is to be safe. He's like, I'm always safe. He goes, no matter where I'm. Rickson would have real like high level black belts start on his back with a fully locked in rear naked choke.
Really?
And then he would defend. And then he would always tap them.
I mean, honestly, to me, that's like holding a 45-pound plate out, letting go, and it just hovers. I mean, it's beyond my understanding how they're able to do that.
Well, there's levels. You know, there's levels to everything.
It was eye-opening when I started. I'm like, oh, yeah, dude, I got this.
I know, right?
I'm like, this is obviously a simple recipe. Go to gym, tap people out. There's nothing in between. I got this. And then after like my first 20 minutes, I'm like, oh, shit.
It's humbling, man.
But
it's
I
so
actually
humbling.
think that's one of the best parts about it. Like, I love... So my body tells me, like, I know who I'm going to have a really, really tough roll with, and they're probably going to beat me, and I can feel it bouncing against my ego. But, like, if I just go roll with that guy over there, I bet you I'll be successful. And I feel that inherently. Mm-hmm. And I'll just go roll with the person I know who's probably going to beat me because I love that choice. One, something that protects your ego and something that keeps it in check.
Yeah.
Because it is humbling. And I've been a dumbass. I should have tapped earlier before, and I'm sitting there. They completely have me locked in. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to try to muscle my way out of this, and then my arm's sore for 3 weeks.
Well, it's actually important to do both. Believe it or not, it's important to be humbled for sure. It's important to have a realistic perspective of your abilities, but it's also important to tap people. And so, I always tell people that like one of the best ways to get really good is to strangle blue belts. Get people that have like a little bit of technique, and they have a little bit of understanding what's going on, and just put the choke to them. But also drilling. But then, you have to roll with people that are legitimately far better than you for a perspective enhancer, to understand how quickly someone can close the distance, how quickly someone can take advantage of an opportunity. And then also the feeling of being set up 2-3 steps in a row. Like one of the things, like when I roll with Jean-Jacques Machado, is he's multiple time world champion, and you'll see, like, especially over time, the many times of training with him, you'll see he's setting you up several steps ahead. If he's sweeping you to the left, right, he's sweeping you this way, he's expecting you to base. And when you base, he's going to adjust, and when you adjust to him adjusting, he's going to grab your leg, and then boom, you're on your back. You're like, fuck. It's like he already saw the path, and all you're thinking of is, oh, don't let him sweep me. But he's sort of trying to sweep you. I mean, if you just give in like a bitch, he'll sweep you, but he's really wanting you to base. And then when you go to defend the base, then he's going to trap you. And then when you go to try to adjust for the trap, whoops, he's got your leg and you're on your back. And then his knee's on your belly and you're like, motherfucker. And he saw the whole thing so many steps ahead. I mean, it's a beautiful art form. It really is, because I always say, like, about the guys that I know that are like some of the best guys in the world, they're so different than what you'd expect. They're really like nerd assassins. Because they're really smart, because you're thinking almost like it's like kinetic chess. You're thinking about all these moves. It's just that you can get your chess pieces to move better than other people's chess pieces can. It's like chess, but you can make your chess, if you do a lot of box jumps and plyos, and you do heavy duty strength and conditioning routines, you can get your chess pieces to move better. You can get you can give your chess pieces more endurance. You can prolong your ability to train and roll.
It's been great. And like I said, in those moments where you're getting choked or I can't breathe, like it's the same type of focus. It is the singular goal in your life to not get murdered. And I feel, for me, it's been crazy healthy. I can't speak to the larger veteran community, but I can absolutely say for me, it's beneficial.
I think it's beneficial for a lot of veterans. I talked to a lot of them that train, and they've said that, and a lot of them get super addicted. They're there 5-6 days a week, and, wrapping up their elbows and their wrists and taping up their fingers, and they don't give a fuck. They just want to keep going. They'll literally roll like this with one arm because their shoulder's blown out. I'm like, you're not going to take time off? I'm just going to work around it. Which is not always good, because eventually I know a lot of guys who've reached a point where they maybe could have rehabbed something, and now they have to have surgery because they've kind of blown it out to the point where it's fucking dangling.
How much do you still roll?
Very little.
Really?
Yeah. I want to get back
choice?
into it. Yeah. I've had some significant injuries. I really backed off a couple of years ago because I had some bulging discs that were impacting my nerves, and they were making my hands hurt and my elbows hurt, and it was my neck had some bulging discs that were pressing against my nerves, and I got Regenikine on that, and I did some spinal decompression, and I relieved all that. Then I tore some meniscus, and I had some shoulder injuries. The shoulder injuries. Man. Yeah, the shoulder injuries were really bothersome because it was also fucking with archery, and I was really worried about not being able to...
Don't fuck with archery.
Yeah, I love it too much. And so I rehabbed those almost 100%. My left one's still a little wonky, but I'm ready to roll. I'm gonna train with Jean-Jacques either this week or next week, and we're going to do a podcast. So I'll get back into it once that happens.
So when did you start jiu-jitsu?
96.
Okay, so substantial period of time. With that amount of time off that you essentially had to take, what impact would that have for you?
It'll have a little bit of impact on my timing, but luckily during this entire time, I've worked out very hard.
Okay.
So my body's physically in very good shape. Like today, I ran the mountains for the first time in like 6 weeks since my meniscus injury, and it seems to be 100%. I mean, maybe not 100%, but no pain at all. And I ran a good steep course where it's, like heavy duty running in the hills, and I was getting cysts, like recurring cysts, because where the meniscus tear was, there was some, it was loose, and so like as I'm pounding, the blood would pool up, and then it would, swell up, and I had to get it drained, and they'd stick this fucking fat needle in there and suck all this pus out. It was nasty. So I got exosomes and platelet-rich plasma 6 weeks ago. So from then, I waited the 6 weeks, but during that time period, I mostly did that Echo bike.
Yeah.
That Rogue Echo bike, because it's not impactful, so it doesn't put the pounding on the knee that was causing the cyst. But fuck, man, does that thing build your cardio up?
Oh, it's designed by Satan.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Tabatas, 20 sprint.
Yep.
Yeah, 20-second sprint, 10-second rest. Fuck, those are incredible.
That bike will give you everything that you are willing to take.
Yeah. It really will. So I'm really pleased with myself that I didn't allow myself to get out of shape. Because when I ran today, I was like, fuck, it's been 6 weeks. This is going to be brutal. It wasn't brutal. It was normal because I've been doing the Echo bike. So it's maintained my cardiovascular level, which was always my weakest point.
And so your knowledge and experience base in jiu-jitsu, and I ask because, like I said, I've been at this for 6 months. I'll take a week off for travel and I'll go back to a class, and I feel like I have a massive disconnect between knowledge and getting my body to work. And I suspect it's because I'm thinking too much.
Right.
Whereas, like I was saying, you have the ability to listen to Miley Cyrus in your head, or whatever her name, Christina Aguilera.
I like Miley Cyrus too.
Awesome. People are into weird shit. I'm not going to put a value judgment on that. Whereas I don't. So for me, if I take time off, I really, really struggle with it because I can't connect the dots. So
it's definitely, there's a difference though. The pathways get sharper when I train more. Like the last time I was doing like serious training was over a year ago. And when I was doing it, like after a few sessions, the pathways sharpen. And like, you clinch up, there's less hesitation. There's more of an understanding of what's got to take place. There's more of like a familiarity with training.
Yeah.
But, as you get older, I'm 51 now, the thing that happens is your fucking joints and your body does not want to hold up to this continued stress. So you have to really be careful about when to train and how hard you train. Like my friend Eddie Bravo is going through that right now. He has a fake disc now in his lower back. He had to have his disc replaced with a titanium articulating disc. He had knee surgery. He had shoulder surgery, and now he needs wrist surgery. This is all within a couple of years, and he's a couple of years younger than me. So his body is hitting that point where this years and years and years of strain and pull and choke and resist and base and push, and your body just doesn't want to do that all the time. So you have to be smart in terms of how much stress and how much recovery you put on. I think you also have to be really smart about working on your flexibility and working on your recovery, whether it's through cryotherapy or sauna use or massage, but rest too. You can't train like a fucking wild demon 6 days a week when you're 50. You just can't. You might get a couple of days in hard, but you also have to understand like flow rolls.
Yeah,
flow rolls are giant. It's the same thing with flow sparring. Like I remember some of the best gains that I made as a kickboxer with training with guys who I knew I could trust to not fucking brain me, like that we would tap each other. And so then you're carving pathways, but you're not taking the kind of abuse that you take if you're just going into, because sometimes sparring, it's not really sparring, you're fighting. You're fighting people in the gym. You just get together and you're lacing up your gloves, you're tapping gloves. They say go, the bell goes off, and you're fucking full blasting each other. And it's more common than not, especially in the early days.
I kind of find that to be the case with two white belts squaring off, saying, because you got to do the blood circle to make sure nobody's going to get hurt by the freaking momentum bouncing around the gym. It's like, hey, buddy, you want to just work on that technique? And they look at you and go, uh-huh. I'm like, oh, fuck.
Yeah. They're just trying to kill. Yeah, they're trying to kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. It's really uncomfortable when someone does that to you, too. You're like, God damn it, do I have to do this with you? Like sometimes you could choke them quick and they'll calm down. And sometimes it just makes them more amped up, depending on the human.
I feel like I need to focus on my chokes now. It's not my strength.
Now, are you mostly going gi? Or are you going no gi as well?
I do more gi than no gi only because it happens to work with my schedule. So Mondays and Friday, I love doing, or I have loved doing the no gi stuff that I have because it's so quick.
Yeah.
And I find that it rotates through a lot of the different positions, and I find myself working out of other problems more than I would in like a normal 5-minute just open roll. And I realize how limited my offense is because I like holding on to the pajamas and basically hold on to a freaking doorknob on somebody's collar. It makes sense to me now when I've heard you talk before, like, yeah, go ahead and wear that sweatshirt. Now I'm like, ooh, I don't I don't really want to wear a
someone
sweatshirt.
wearing a tie. Someone wearing a tie. I'm like, I'll kill you with that tie. I get a hold of that tie, you're a dead man. You
Even
got a
like
noose around your neck.
A zip-up hoodie.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, oh, man. First, obviously, I'd rub that zipper across your neck, but then you're getting choked with it.
Well, how about a leather jacket if you're fucking with someone in the street and that someone's a judo player? Someone who knows judo and you got like a thick-ass winter coat and they can
you're
grab
done.
that shit and brain you with the world.
Yeah.
They'll just drive your fucking head into the concrete.
It's been cool, man. I wish I had found it earlier, and I wish I hadn't been so hesitant to try it earlier. And the reason I was, 100% reason I was, is because of my own ego.
Yeah, but the thing is, it doesn't matter like when I wish I had done it earlier. Fuck all that. You're doing it now. Like that's what's important. Like it doesn't matter when you start. The thing about jiu-jitsu is once you're on a path, just enjoy the path. Don't think, God, I should have started when I was 8. Well, you can't unless you have a fucking time machine.
Yeah.
And if you did, God damn it, I would not want to go back and be 8 years old and know everything I know now. And like it'd be like watching a movie for the 100th time.
You'd be bored out of your mind.
Well, I'd fuck it up. I'd probably wind up homeless.
Your stock portfolio would be amazing because of all the knowledge.
Maybe, right? It'd be like Apple.
Yeah.
These fuckers are going to figure it out.
Buy Apple at 3.
Yeah.
Let's get some Amazon stock going. Like you'd kill it on that.
I
But
know people be like, "What? A book
Yeah.
thing? An online book thing?" Trust me.
don't worry about it. Put it all in there.
Put all your money on Facebook. What's Facebook? The fuck are you talking? You know, David Cho, he painted Facebook. He did like murals for Facebook in their studio, and they paid him in stock, and he got
wow.
fucking hundreds of millions from that, and he's just balling all over the world on his Facebook stock.
They don't seem to be doing too well these days, though. Seeing them-
Facebook stock?
Yeah, no, not the stock necessarily. The company. I keep seeing them in the news for the wrong reasons.
Yes, that's a really interesting point, right? You know, I've been focusing a lot on what these people are doing in terms of social media and in terms of what impact this has on our elections, on our culture, how they're being influenced. There's a woman.
How about privacy.
Yeah, we booked that woman, right? Renee. What is her last name again? She's got a phenomenal podcast with Sam Harris called The War of Information. And it's either The Information War or The War of Information. Renee DiResta. And she studied this. She studied these Russian troll farms and the impact they have and these fake accounts online. And what they'll do is like for instance, they set up 2 rallies across the street from each other. One was a Texas Pride rally and one was a Muslim rally.
It's classic pairing.
And they do it across the street from each other on purpose so that they'll interact with each other. So that people get there, there's no one organizing it because there's no real person on the ground because they're doing everything from Russia. And this is just one example. They do a lot of things with Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. They were having a lot of these. They were pairing them against each other. They were also they had black pages that were supporting anyone but Hillary. This was their message, anyone but Hillary. Hillary Clinton does not support the black community. We should vote for Bernie Sanders. We should vote for Jill Stein. We should vote for anybody but Hillary. And what they were basically trying to do was weaken the support that the Democrats traditionally have from the black community. And they're doing this through these pages. And there was not that many pages when you find out there's like 80 pages or 100 pages they were running. But then you find out the amount of interactions that they had with, and there's millions and millions and millions of interactions. So comments, likes, shares, and then people are, this message that they think is coming from people from their community is actually coming from Russia, and it's actually a calculated attempt to sow dissent and to sow this conflict in America. And the idea is, and it sounded so crazy to me that because I wasn't really paying attention to it that much, but the idea is that they're trying to make us fight against each other about everything so that it fucks up democracy. So the idea is to undermine
they've achieved that goal, whether or not they're responsible for it or not, but it certainly seems like we're trending in that direction.
It does. I can't remember a time where there's more conflict and more outrage and more people willing to jump into the fray regardless of whether or not they're informed.
What do you think about the people who keep calling for violence?
It drives me crazy. because it's people who don't understand violence.
I was going to say the same thing. I see the people who most often doing it are the ones that are the least experienced or familiar with what violence actually looks like.
Well, there was a lot of that from Russia as well. There was a lot of fake Antifa pages. There was a lot of that. There was a lot of that where they were telling people that the only way to get people to understand is through violence, and that you must be willing to do whatever you can by any means necessary. And violence is good if it achieves the desired result of peace and prosperity and making sure that progressive ideas get pushed forth. It's fucking crazy because people who don't know what violence is, it's like, here's one that people say, they'll say to a martial arts person, like they'll see someone like John Jones, like if I was John Jones, I'd just fucking kick everybody's ass. Like, no, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't, okay?
Yeah.
You know, and all the problems that John Jones has been in, one thing you should notice is never been in a fight. There's no street fights out there with John Jones. You know, I mean, it's like,
I would bet he is the least likely person to engage in that activity.
I bet you're right. Yeah,
Because
exactly.
he doesn't want to do it, because he knows exactly the consequences, let alone the legal consequences of doing it outside of a cage.
Exactly. But when you look at it from someone who has zero understanding, they're like, oh, if I was that guy, I'd be kicking everybody's ass. But no, you wouldn't. Because like violence, people don't just accept violence. You don't just hit someone to get away with it. They think about that shit forever, and they try to get you back. And either they hire someone to get you back, or they get you back on their own, or they wait for you to not remember it, and then they come around the corner and fucking brain you with a baseball bat. This is what people do. People don't like getting fucked up. If you kick someone's ass, they're gonna remember it. And this idea that you're gonna be able to suppress people by attacking them and hitting them with bike locks and and not letting them speak at universities that you're protesting at, it's madness, and it's so confusing because it's not indicative of what I always thought of when I thought about left-wing people. I thought they were peace-loving people or well-educated, and instead you're getting these people that are from their fucking computer, they're calling for violence. Like, you don't know what violence is.
Well, and the thing is, too, from what I've seen, it didn't start with the bike locks, right? It started with, shout this person down.
Yes.
And then it's like fist fights, and then they're throwing rocks, and then it's bike locks. And now I hear people, get your guns. And it starts to rise to that level. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
You people need to calm down, because the theory of we need a revolution in this country, like, let's pump the brakes, homeboy. Right? Yeah.
Well, first of all, here's what we need. We need camaraderie. We need to be nice. This is more important than anything. We need to be calm with each other. This idea that yelling people down stops anything. You're just going to make people yell louder on the other side. That shit does not work. That's not how human beings operate. If you want human beings to appreciate your perspective, find the things that you agree on and work towards like a better humanity, work towards a better, more loving way of interacting with each other. This is possible while disagreeing. And this is one of the most important things I think that we could ever express in terms of how to communicate with each other. You don't have to shout people down. Like the best way to do it is to try to figure out the points that you can agree on, find out what you disagree on, and find out why you disagree on it. And you're always going to get bad actors, right? You're always going to get people that are in there that they don't care, they're not reasonable, they just want to win. But there's a giant problem with that kind of communicating because it's so absolute. It's my way or the highway. Like that's where violence comes from. That's where real physical conflicts, that's where they come from, when there's no way to negotiate, there's no way to communicate outside of that.
I just think I don't know, bizarre is not the right word. I think it's sad that the vast majority, from, again, my opinion, what I see is people who are identifying with shit you can see on a street sign.
Yeah.
Like left or right. Like You're telling me that as a species that's as nuanced as we can get, you want to completely define yourself and your ideology and your beliefs by something literally you can see just driving your car. Turn left, turn right. It's just, I don't understand it. I don't, it's the exact opposite world. To go back to, getting out of the military and just kind of entering into the world. I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah.
It makes no sense to me. It makes me extremely uncomfortable. I hate hearing people calling for violence.
I know, and especially calling for violence when it's not necessary against Americans. What you had to deal with in the military has to be the most intense form of conflict that's available on planet Earth. The most intense form of conflict is war. That's the real conflict. That's real consequences. You've suffered them physically. You've seen countless friends suffer them physically. That's the real shit. So when you're seeing people from universities, from these coddled environments and these people with a really a completely ignorant perspective as to what the actual consequences of violence are, calling for it. It's just bananas.
On one hand, I'm glad that they haven't experienced it, because I can tell that they haven't just by the way that they're acting. And I'm glad that they didn't have to do that. But on the other one, it's a tough pill to swallow, because I just don't understand. War is it's about as high consequence as you can get, for sure. Like I said, it resets your perspective. And the last thing that I would ever want to see is that here on the streets of the U.S. Like I can't even imagine how destructive. Well, it would destroy our country for sure. But I can't figure out the route out of where we are. So people are calling for violence, right? And you got other countries trying to incite, get groups together. Like, what's the navigable route out of that?
Mushrooms.
Okay, I hadn't considered that route.
It's the only way. I honestly don't know. I'm hoping that things don't have to come to a head. I'm hoping that we don't have a Kent State or some horrible event in this country where, protesters and the people that oppose them get into some horrible, deadly, violent encounter. Because so far, other than Charlottesville, that time that guy ran over that woman with a car, we're seeing most of this violence being at least somewhat contained to fisticuffs, right? And, the professor that hit that guy with a bike lock, and there's a few other instances of people getting knocked out and punched and hit with sticks. We haven't seen mass shootings and murder, but God damn it, that shit's close. Especially
it's when they're doing rallies and people are like, let's do an open carry rally, and everybody show up in their operator chic apparel with. I look at the pictures of that. I'm like, okay, you have a lot of stuff. First off, that's on fucking backwards. I'm like, okay, you have all the tools, but you obviously don't practice with them.
Yeah.
But the danger of just, what's the next step? First, we're just gonna, we're gonna wear all of our stuff. All right. Well, if it started at fist and then went bike locks and then went show up with your Civil War gear.
Right.
What's the next step after that?
Shooting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't want to get involved in that.
Well, you picked a good spot where you're at in Montana.
Where I live does not suck.
Yeah, hang out there and move in once the first few rounds have been fired. The dust starts to settle. The
problem is I would want to come off the bench.
Of course.
But the problem is if that happens, and I guarantee you I'm not the only one that feels like that. I'm going to get involved. And it's going to be a serious problem for those individuals, because I'd give my military career a C across the board, average. There's absolutely nothing spectacular about my career. I've done more than some, way less than others. But I've sacrificed enough that I'm not going to allow those people to tear us apart. But it's the last thing on earth that I want to do. But if they put me in that position, I know that myself and many other people who are in that same boat are going to get involved. And I don't know if that's going to help the problem, but it's going to get ugly pretty fast.
I just don't remember a time where the country's been so divided in terms of, I don't know whether it's because of social media and because of the Russian influence on social media, compounded with having Trump as a president, compounded with, people that feel like they're disenfranchised and they don't feel like they're, like, you hear about this all the time in regards to income inequality. Yep. People feel disenfranchised. They feel like the system has failed them. And that's why so many young kids are favoring socialism. And why so many young kids are moving towards that. They think that anything has got to be better than watching these fat, rich cats with all this money controlling the world. And that the only way to get out of that is revolution. But damn, there's a lot of people that are not those fat, rich cats you're positioning yourself against. That are just normal, regular Americans who happen to be conservative. And conservative does not always have to equal racist. It doesn't always have to equal white supremacy. It doesn't always have to equal all the negative connotations, religious fanaticism and all these different things that people always attach towards conservatism. It doesn't have to mean that. It could just mean people who are prudent with their finances, who are, they're cautious with the way they think. They're more conservative in their values and their ideals. That's not a bad thing necessarily, but we've got it lumped into these two groups, left versus right, and there's a very little gray area.
It's the tyranny of war.
Yeah.
It's like, it's as if there's only two choices.
Yeah.
You're either left or right.
Yeah.
Where's the and? Where's you? trend to the left, and you also have some values that are associated with the right.
Yeah.
Or you trend. It's.
I think we need to evolve. I think we need to evolve the way we communicate with each other. First off, I think there's so much yelling on social media that people engage in on a daily basis. I mean, I jump into these little social media spats and watch these people going back and forth with each other. I'm like, how do you live your life? That has got to be so stressful. You got to be fucking freaking out every time you check your phone. Who's calling you a cuck and who's giving out your home address and who's what kind of crazy shit are people doing? It's so nuts right now.
I'm glad I'm late to the game on that stuff. I'm like so late. So I have 2 teenage boys and a 10-year-old girl, and we've had some social media issues with them. If I grew up with the tools that they have, I would not be sitting here with you today. Yeah. If I had, when I was 15, the ability to broadcast my idiotic thoughts to the world, I would be I can't. Yeah. It would. I tell my kids too. I'm like, you guys are growing up in a time, in my opinion, that is so much more difficult than the time I grew up in.
Agreed.
If I had a problem with you, I'd be like, Joe, I would talk shit to your face.
Yeah.
Or I'd have to find out what your phone number is, or mail you a letter.
Mail you a letter.
Which would, and then by the time it showed up, I wouldn't be pissed at you anymore.
Yeah.
So it would defeat the purpose. I mean, I've seen it firsthand, responding to stuff. People, they're just watching and then they dive in and, and like screen grabs.
Yep.
Next thing you know, I'm at school. Like, hello, Mr. Stumpf, how are you? Would like to show you this. I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. But I get it at the same time.
Right.
And I recognize the language that they're using. I'm like, oh yeah, that was me, but I was just talking to you.
Right.
And
right.
I don't know how to, it's a very difficult for me. You got it coming. I mean, because I think your daughters are younger than my sons. It's rough.
Yeah, it is rough, and it's something that no one has done before. Here's the thing, like if you're in your 40s or in your 50s or whatever and you have a kid today, you haven't done that. You didn't grow up with the internet. The internet didn't even exist until I was a grown man. I didn't get online until I was in my late 20s. That's when it existed. And these kids that are 10 and 11, they have phones already and they have Snapchat accounts and they're and then there's one of the craziest ones is kids taking naked pictures of each other. Because this girl got arrested for child pornography because she was taking pictures of her hoo-ha and sending it to boys, and she was 15. And so they were arresting her for distribution of child pornography. And I'm like, hey, stop with the fucking word of the law, you assholes. Do you really think this girl's a child pornographer? She's a slut. This is we grew up with kids like this. Sorry, I don't mean to slut shame, but I mean for lack of a better term.
Yeah,
for comedic intent, I had to use that word. She's just a young girl, is probably misguided. But the point is, we all knew girls like that, and for whatever reason, had this desperate need for male attention.
They just didn't have a platform.
Yeah, they would just flash you their tits in the hallway or something like that. I mean, there was always girls that would do that.
I never had that happen.
You never had that happen?
No.
I knew girls that would do that. It was always like
you're East Coast guy, though. I was a West Coast guy.
They're different over there?
I would have to assume so, given we don't have the same shared experience.
I think they're more savage on the East Coast. Because they're the children of immigrants, or the grandchildren of immigrants. And this is my theory on, this is my take on America in terms of immigration, right? It's like the people that moved here from somewhere else, they moved here from Europe, and they were wild fuckers who was like, you know what? I don't have a picture of this place. There's no YouTube video for me to watch, but I'm going to take a chance, and I'm going to get in a fucking boat with my family. I'm going to travel across a goddamn ocean.
For weeks.
Yeah. And then I'm going to get to the other side, and they're all in these weird communities of people. Like, my grandfather would always talk about how racist people were against Italians, and then there was a lot of that against Irish, and all these like immigrant communities on the East Coast. And then what happens is they would get in their car and they would go, fuck this place, let's go west. And they would keep going until they got to California. And I think that's why California is like one of the most progressive places, because it's the furthest away from where people landed. So the people that wanted to get the fuck away from them, they got as far away as they could.
And the even smarter ones came to Montana.
And then there's some people in the middle that went, why are we traveling? Let's just stop right here. Especially like you go to places like, I mean, there's a lot of places that are fucking amazing that are like in the middle.
Flyover states, yeah.
I mean, you call it flyover states, but I mean, there's a lot of great spots in Texas.
Yeah.
You go to Austin, you go, okay, why are we moving?
Yeah.
Why don't we just stay right here? Like, this is fucking great. Like, do we really need to go to Santa Monica? No, we can just stay right here.
San Antonio is pretty cool too. I was down there with Dudley twice in the last month, and pretty cool town.
I've never been.
It's well, I shouldn't say town. I think it's the 8th largest city in the United States, but
Is it really? San Antonio is?
pretty sure, yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. I did not know that. What do you think
don't know.
about? You don't know about that?
Damn it.
Jamie's
Damn
not
it. I was
buying it.
told that it was the 8th largest.
By San Antonio president and mayor.
No, actually, Evan from Black Rifle.
They have. Oh, there you go. Head of tourism for San Antonio. I think San Antonio is like the 4th in Texas. So it's like Dallas is number 1.
Probably
Houston, Austin, San Antonio. So 4th in Texas. That doesn't really make sense. That it would be 8th in the country.
I think it might be with like actual size, like
like land
miles or something.
Okay.
Like that.
That's exactly what I meant.
Oh, I get it. So Alaska is the biggest state in the country in terms of distance that you could travel. Have you been there much?
Alaska, we go there, or the only last time I was there, I had some interesting experiences actually the last time I was there. That's where we do our cold weather training. So the only times I have been there was for work, which I had fun, but it was also not enjoyable at the same time.
Those are real savages. Those people live around wild animals.
Yes.
There's only like 100 of them,
We would go to legit Kodiak Island.
What, Jamie?
It's number 7 as far as population.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yes.
1,469,000. So it's actually bigger than you thought. Wow, it's bigger than Phoenix?
That's bigger than San Diego, just under Phoenix.
Oh, Phoenix is 6. I see. That's crazy. It's just under fucking. It's just past Philly. Philly's number 5 after Houston. That's nuts, man.
There's not more than 1.5 million people in Philly, though. That doesn't seem right.
That doesn't seem right.
This number for San Diego seemed very low as well.
Yeah.
I thought it was in like the 3s.
I don't know what they're counting, actually. I just Googled it. It doesn't
Assholes.
say what they're
Top
counting.
largest city for assholes.
Number
New
1.
York is only 8 million? What? Los Angeles. Okay, shut
they're
your
going
fucking mouth.
proper.
Los Angeles, 3,900,000.
Yeah.
Los Angeles has 20 million people, and who knows how many Mexican folks. They don't have any idea how many people have snuck across the border. They literally have no idea.
Yeah.
It's just pure guesswork. Like what? Who's doing these censuses, and who are they talking to? Like, what would they have? Traffic cameras that are judging based on the amount of cars that are driving past them every day? They don't really know.
I think it's a guess.
It's a fucking guess.
They probably have one place where
Yeah.
they have a video camera up where they can capture a certain amount.
Yeah.
Multiply it by a magnitude and then extrapolate that over, like, I don't know.
Actually, it's probably scientists. They're probably pretty good at guessing. We're probably retarded.
I don't know on that
I shouldn't
one.
use that word. I think our take on it though is really essentially based on like how many people are registered in this area, how many people we absolutely know, and then how many people have pushed into this area from other places. Like how? What's up?
Sorry, it's the number 38 TV market somehow. So I don't
What
know.
is? What
San
is?
Antonio.
Oh,
So I don't know how it fits in that number that way. It's very strange how they're counting.
they don't have TVs. They've moved past TVs.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe they're just reading
Potentially.
books. Maybe it's number 1 for book reading.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's not the case.
Well, it's I don't know, man. It's an interesting thing, like population, because when you fly over the country, you look down, you go, wow, look at all that spot that people could live in. Like, are we really overpopulated? But then
In certain areas, and in
Yeah.
others, not so much.
well, in others, you just fly over and there's nothing there forever.
Yeah.
Like I drove from Vegas to LA, and there's some spots where you drive from Vegas to LA where as you're driving, you go, okay, what the fuck is here? Like what? Who are these people that live in these weird little Nevada towns that are off of the 15?
Not even the towns, man. So I used to fly a bunch from San Diego out to Prescott and then kind of do that loop, Havasu in like the Vegas area. Miles from anything double wide trailer.
Yeah, just
Dirt
laid
roads, single. But then at the same time, you could, because you're higher up, you can see the geometric patterns. Like it's just chunks of squares, and there's 2 double wides 5 miles away. Like I don't know, sand people.
there. Yeah, I saw one where this guy had this setup, and they had a fence around his house, and then he had a fucking antenna. Like one of them big-ass ham radio antennas.
Yeah, he's just talking to aliens.
He's
just communicating with the alien race.
Or fellow alien researchers who are out there looking for.
Yeah, I have... I'd rather go into houses overseas than make entry into that man's house.
Yeah, probably less pathogens. Who knows what's in there?
Yeah, less likely to get beamed up to the Starship Enterprise, too.
That too, right? That too. I just wonder, like, how a person winds up in that double-wide trailer miles away from Barstow. Like, how do you, like, what path do you get from being a baby coming out of your mama's vagina to one day being holed up, sniffing bath salts, you know, smelling your own farts.
Thinking nailed it.
Yeah, counting how many bullets you have in case the aliens come to get you.
Fortunately, I find a lot of those people either have a lot of guns or a lot of bullets, but not both at the same time. You'd be surprised how many. It's like, wow, you have a lot of guns. Where's your ammo? I got a box of it over there. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah.
And someone should do like a trailer park tour of this country, just like as for a documentary. Just what happened? How'd you get here? Like, was your family from here? Like, this is not a good community. We got to get you out of here.
Yeah.
What's your escape plan? What is
no escape plan.
You're 200 miles away from the nearest city. You're surrounded by desert, and you have a trailer out here. Like, what's going on, man?
I always think, but where do you go for groceries and how often?
You eat rabbits that you find in your backyard.
Sometimes, probably. I'm like, dude, if you went to the grocery store and came back, damn it, I forgot the milk.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Find a javelin and suck his dick.
That is not a solid picture.
It's not a good option.
Have you been to Alaska much?
I've only been a few times.
Where'd you go?
Went to Anchorage. Me and Ari Shafir did some salmon fishing. Had a great time doing that. And then we did 2 shows up there. And then I've been hunting on Prince of Wales. We did some Sitka deer hunting. Blacktail.
So Barklow from Sitka ran, not when I went through, but he ran the cold weather facility on Kodiak Island.
Oh, okay.
For like 15 years.
Kodiak can go fuck itself with those goddamn gigantic, huge, humongous bears.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. We had some interesting experiences. That's where we did our cold weather training.
Did you run into bears?
There are always bears around, but also having a machine gun helps with that. So
that does make you feel better.
It makes you feel better, but not when you're sleeping at night.
Ooh, we camped?
We would do snowshoe, like just deep into the back. So we would go and you had to do your cold weather training, so getting your dry suits on and swimming through the surf at nighttime.
Oh, wonderful.
Which is an ice cream headache over and over and over again as the ocean breaks over your head. It's pretty bad. And the cold weather immersion test is there where you have to get into the water with just a pair of shorts on for 5 minutes and just then rewarm yourself.
So they get you to a point of hypothermia right to the edge?
I think, as many things are in my old job, there is a aspect of learning and there is an aspect of tough it out, and you combine the two. So it sucked, and there was a reason that they wanted it to suck, but they were also trying to teach a lesson.
Right.
But God forbid they just teach the lesson, so they make you suffer to ingrain it probably.
Yeah.
So one day you wake up and on the board, like a little whiteboard that has the list of gear you need, it just says shorts, running shoes. And I'm like, okay, this is February in Kodiak. What are you talking about? Literally it said shorts, running shoes.
Oh, no.
Get out in the Ford Econoline van. So we all get out there and they drive to the beach where seawater is freezing at the edge. And they say, okay, go out. You have to completely submerge yourself, neck deep water, 5 minutes. And the timer starts. The timer starts when the last person submerges their head.
Oh, God. So you might be first? You might be like
you
an
could
overzealous
rush out there
fella?
and be all fired up, and you're just going to get 7.5 minutes is what you're going to get. So you go and you sit there, and it's the cold. It hurts for a minute, and then you're numb. The worst thing about it actually is rewarming. It feels like you're just getting pinpricked over and over and over again. Yes, that's actually Barklow.
Oh, that is Barklow. Look at him standing up there on that rock. Well, yeah. Barklow has a great rewarming drill that we actually played on the podcast before for Sitka, where he takes their gear and jumps into a lake.
So that is the test that they're doing.
Yeah, and then rewarms himself with basically all Sitka's gear and figures out how to get your body back to what I thought was interesting that I never really considered was that eating food actually ramps up your body heat because you have to burn off the calories.
Yep.
Your body starts processing the food that actually is good for elevating body temperature, eating food, especially if you can get hot food, of course.
Yep.
But just eating.
So the drill he was doing actually had much more I would say, educational benefit, because they would take them there with all of their gear. Their gear list would say whatever they were wearing, plus bring your tent, your sleeping bag, and all your stuff, because we're going to put you into the water, and then you need to survive your way out of it. So they would have to erect a tent. They would have to get their sleeping bag out, all after being in the water for 5 minutes, which is exactly what a survival situation is going to look like. For us, we went in there, got back into the van, and I sat in a hot tub and drank beer for the rest of the day. So I got the understanding of what it feels like to be hypothermic, and they have to push their head underwater.
Woo.
That guy right there is either screwing everybody or was the first person to complete it.
Now, Wim Hof does so much of this cold water submersion stuff, and he actually enjoys it and loves it.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a way that you could use like his methods and get through that with less pain?
Potentially, even though, all of the skills that I used in Kodiak, I did not ever use a single one of them operationally.
I use his breathing method in the cryo tank.
That makes sense.
Cryotherapy.
That makes sense, but those Arctic conditions, I don't know, at least in the modern theaters of war we're engaged in, I don't know where the applicability would be. So it might be a little bit of a benefit versus time expended to teach the guys that stuff. Because unless it's we're talking like Korea, probably farther in the northern latitudes. I mean, it's like the training was amazing. Like I said, I didn't use a single bit of it.
Right, but it's something. Well, it's also building mental toughness and determination.
And that's why I said there's an aspect of learning, and there's an aspect of just this is going to suck.
Right.
Hey, you guys, guess what? You're going to do a 20-kilometer hike into the backcountry in snowshoes. There is no end state to this. There's no target you're going to do anything on. You're just going to go out there and you're going to do it, and you're going to survive out there, and it's going to suck for 3 days, and then you're going to come back.
You just embrace the suck.
Or you learn how to pack your backpack better.
Yeah.
Or you learn how to move better over that terrain, or you learn how to navigate in that environment. So there's always an essence of it, but it just happens to be that there's usually a pain component with it as well.
Yeah.
A lot of military training is like that. There's an essence of pain compliance, and then the actual learning technique as well.
Yeah, it's the learning technique. I mean, it is really you're learning a technique to manage your mind under sucky conditions. I mean, that is a technique as well, right?
So I was actually having a conversation with somebody about this recently. I'm of the opinion that really the only thing that I learned how to do when I was a SEAL was to enhance my ability to learn other things. You're selecting for people, and to get to that point, you got to maintain control of your emotions, whether you're in pain or you're hot or you're cold. So there's that essence of self-control, but then they require so many different skill sets and so many different things that the selection process is looking for, and then at the end of it, teaching people how to become better learners. And then you just refine that over and over and over again over a career. It's the ability to learn is probably the biggest takeaway that I have from my time in the service.
I think that's the best thing you could ever really learn is learning how to learn.
Yeah.
Like learning how to learn correctly, learning how to actually pay attention to what someone's teaching you and absorb it and follow the steps rather than fuck it up with your own ego and your own insecurities or whatever it is that's going to trip you up. If you can get good at something, you can apply that to almost anything if you really focus.
Yeah. And then they would pair it with, we'll surround you by, okay, we want to make you better at shooting. So we are going to go find world champion pistol carbine shooters. Go apply your ability to learn with them. And we would do it for weeks. Okay, now you're going to specialize. You're going to be a point man. So you need to be able to navigate and climb. So we're going to send you out to Joshua Tree for 2 weeks with world-class climbers. Go apply your ability to learn with them. And then jumping, and then diving, and then tactics, and then fill in the blank over a career.
That's another thing that freaks me out is climbing. Did you do much climbing?
I was a lead climber up until the point where I don't have a use of my ankle anymore because of the nerve injury.
Oh.
And it's funny is I don't like heights.
Did you free solo at all?
As long as I wasn't more like than 3 feet off the ground, yes, I'm totally comfortable free soloing and moving laterally, but not vertically away from the ground. Because I watched,
oh my God, Honnold's
I watched that movie 3 times in a row. And here's the thing. I know he's alive. I know he was on your podcast. I listened to it. And in the final scenes, I realized I was sitting there white knuckling my recliner. Like my hands were sweating. I'm like, I know he lives, but it still freaked me the fuck out.
Wow.
I mean, that guy.
Yeah, he's something.
But you know what's interesting about climbing is you get, the more exposure you have, the less it bothers you. Like So lead climbing is interesting, especially if you are placing your protection as you go. If it's drilled and bolted.
You're saying league or lead?
Lead, L-E-A-D.
Oh, lead. Like someone's in front of you. You're on a rope.
As a lead climber, you are probably setting the ropes. At least in my old job, you're setting the ropes for the people who are going to follow.
Okay.
Most of the time when you see people, well, not most of the time, but one of the disciplines would be there's bolted routes that go up a rock. So you can just bring, carabiners and put the carabiner through that, and you loop the rope through it, and you're good to go. Mm-hmm. Another aspect would be is you don't use the bolted in stuff, and you basically carry on your climbing harness a rack of gear. So as you're holding on to the rocks, you're trying to wedge a block or a stopper in, or a cam system that it rotates to be smaller, and then as you release, it opens up, and if you pull against it, it locks itself into the rock.
Right.
So you're setting your own protection. And
how much do you trust those things? So
that was the point that I was getting to. Sometimes you get to a place and you're like, this is the perfect piece of gear. And of course, you're only like 6 feet off the ground when the perfect piece of gear. And then you'll get multi-pitches up in the air. So you'll be 200-300 feet up in the air. And you're a lead climber, so there's nobody above you, and you're setting your own pro. And you're starting to get emotionally involved in the situation that you're in. And you set a piece of pro, and it's rattling around a little bit. So I don't know. We don't know how good that one's going to be, but we're going to keep climbing. And then the next piece of pro you set, not the most awesome piece, because you're worried about the one beneath you, and you don't want to fall, so you get it in there, and then you just keep climbing. So sometimes it's awesome, and sometimes it's terrifying.
And then you got to think that if you do fall, all that force, if one pops and then the second one pops, you've got a lot of distance.
Well, you got to think it's double the distance. If you're 10 feet above the last piece of protection you put in, you fall the 10 feet to the protection, then the 10 feet past the protection.
Clink, clink, clink.
And then it pulls on the pro. So it's actually double the height that you are above it. It's not, I've been probably more scared out of my mind. Actually, the scariest I've ever been is you lived in Boulder, right?
Yeah.
There's a climb there called the Bastille Crack. It's in one of the national parks. And I was there with a buddy. And it was just me and him and a world-class climber. And I was at the East Coast Command at the time, so budget was no option. I had the newest, shiniest stuff. I'm like taking plastic off of climbing gear to go climb this rock. This guy pulls up in a van with a Marlboro hanging out and tennis shoes that have laces probably on one of the shoes and an old pair of pants. And he's climbed like every mountain ever. So it's me and my buddy. We're climbing our way up. I'm leading this pitch. So you switch. One guy will climb. He sets an anchor. The other person comes up and they pick all the protection out. So you can just switch. And then the other person leads the way on the next one. So I'm like halfway up this pitch and I can't move because I'm losing my shit. I'm like 15 feet above the last piece of protection that I just put in. I'm convinced that I feel my feet slipping off of the rock. I have my hand jammed into the rock, and then you make a fist to prevent it from falling out. You can actually see Alex doing that in free solo as he's climbing up. They'll slide their hand in, and then they'll manipulate the shape so it pulls. And as my world is collapsing on me, and I'm just sitting there, I've got full sewing machine leg, just sitting there, just shaking. I hear a voice just over my shoulder. He's like, "Hey, man, just put the piece of pro right there." And I look over, and this professional climber is right next to me with no rope, in his fucking tennis shoes, smoking a cigarette, which is what he was using to point to where I should have placed the next piece of protection. Cool, calm, and collected. And I almost fell off the rock because he scared me so bad. I was so freaked out at what he was doing that I almost fell. I'm like, "You need to get away from me immediately." He's like, "Yeah, no problem." And just scurried up the rock in tennis shoes.
Tennis shoes?
Tennis shoes.
But you're not supposed to use tennis shoes, right?
I don't think it mattered. I think the guy, he was a complete monkey. When you're around world-class climbers, I mean, they can hang on an edge that is like a couple pieces of paper. Mm-hmm. And the Bastille Crack is not a difficult route, so I'm sure there was one right next to it. And he just, as I'm freaking out, he's just sitting there just, "Hey, buddy." And I didn't know he was there. I literally almost fell off because he talked to me.
Smoking a cigarette?
Yeah, he was ashing it. He's like, "Put a piece of pro right here. Get away from me."
That's a different kind of, but I guess it's one of those things where it's like you just
exposure.
Get better at it. You just,
After a week of climbing, you will not feel bad about walking up to the edge and just standing there.
Alex Honnold was telling us a story about one time he was free soloing and he was halfway up and he was in the middle of this journey up this fucking mountain. He realized he didn't bring any powder. so he didn't have any chalk with him. So his hands are sweating and he's just climbing with no powder. So he met a guy halfway up, these guys that were using ropes, and they were doing it the right way, and he's doing it with no ropes. And he goes, "Hey man, can I borrow your chalk?" And the guy gives him a chalk bag, and he goes, "I'll leave it for you at the top of the mountain." So he takes the chalk bag, passes these guys, "See ya," and just keeps going, and then leaves the bag for the guy at the top of the hill. I'm like, what in the fuck, man? How could you start something like that? And apparently he said that once you start climbing, you are committed to climbing. It's
harder to climb down than up.
Yeah, fuck that.
There's not enough money in the world that would make me attempt the stuff that he does. And if I was a climber if I was feeling like I'm kicking ass.
Feel my hand.
Sweaty?
Feel my hand. Just talking about it. I sweat like a pig.
Dude, I'm telling you, I was watching it white knuckling. And if I was a climber and he passed me and was like, "Hey, do you mind if I borrow your chalk?" I would finish that climb and never climb again.
Yeah, Billy,
because
I'm done.
I would realize that I am a complete and utter bitch in comparison to what he is. Like, if that's what's possible, and I'm sitting here struggling, I'm like, I'm out.
You're also built wrong for it. I think the thin, wiry guys, it's the way to go. He also has these
gorilla mitts.
Thick-ass fingers, man. His fingers are just used to just grabbing. But he also said that he had gone through a series of injuries for the first time in his life, recently, over the last few years.
Yeah, that was in the movie, actually. Yeah. He, a compression of his discs and then a really bad strain on his ankle. And he was told to take 6 months off, and so he just started climbing in a cast.
Sure. So it's a different kind of human. I mean, he also lives out of a van. I mean, he's a world famous guy who's living in a van, traveling around, just fucking climbing rocks.
Did you have him on after he had completed that climb? They were.
Yeah.
Okay, so he had been successful, and they were just probably editing the project.
I had him on earlier, years ago.
Yeah.
And then I had him on again recently.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the guy I would want to talk to is Jimmy Chin, the photographer who is capturing all that.
Oh, he's up there with him, right?
That's the thing. I would want to talk. Well, and he talks about it a little bit more so in the promos for the film, but how sketched out he was to actually be involved and sit there and film, and how much of a burden he felt to stay out of the periphery and not get engaged in the headspace and make Alex do something different because the cameras were there that would of course cost him his life.
Right.
I can't imagine the pressure of doing that, or just I wouldn't do it. If a buddy of mine was like, "Hey, will you come film me free?" I would say no, because I would be so afraid of just watching them peel off.
Oh, can you imagine if you were up there filming and you watched the guy fall?
That would be rough. And they're of course good friends.
Mm-hmm.
And
look at that. Look at this guy.
Yeah, this dude is
Jimmy.
A savage.
Well, he's got his hands on the camera only.
Well, he's got a bunch of stuff. So you see his left foot is in. He's kind of he's kind of secured down there. He's got that carabiner. He's got one going to his harness. He's actually got two ropes going to his harness. So he's kind of angled in. There's like a triangle. But he's a world-class climber in and of himself.
Well, he also has a giant-ass camera bag. Look at that big-ass bag hanging from his hip. Look at that position he's in, too. Yep. Oh, fuck all this, Jimmy.
So that's how they get in, that's how they get into position for a lot of it. He's Jumaring. Instead of climbing the rock, he's got basically ascenders that will allow you to push it up, and then they lock on the rope. So he's got one leg in there and one arm, and he's kind of Jumaring. We use those a lot of the times as well, but he's a world-class climber in and of himself.
I kind of think you'd have to be, right, in order to
be able to capture that?
Yeah.
Yeah, the team that I think they put together was like 5 to 7 world-class guys, but there's a movie of him called, no thanks.
What is that? What is that guy doing?
He's hanging probably 3,000 foot over nothing, focusing on capturing the shot.
Oh, my God.
I would be focusing on the urine streaming down my leg.
It'd be, yeah. Oh, my God. Soaking your socks.
Oh, God. Like, I couldn't do that. But I could go to the edge of that cliff and zip up my suit, absolutely no problem, and send that off there, and I bet you he would want no piece of that. It's so bizarre.
Yeah.
If he's shooting Alex, who's shooting him?
Dude, good question.
Is there a third person? Is Alex
another guy.
Turn around like,
There's
hey,
Mikey. Mikey shooting Jimmy.
In the Free Solo movie, I think they had a team of like 5 to 7 people. They had long lens, they had people up there, they had remote cameras. I mean, it's a whole. They obviously had drones flying around.
Yeah. Well, there was a film that, besides this film, the recent documentary, which I think is called Solo, right?
Free Solo.
Free Solo.
Yep.
Before that, there was also a late night, one of those news shows like ABC World News Tonight or something like that. They did a whole piece on him. And they had this one guy who is a, world-class climber and said it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when he falls.
Every innovator in the wingsuit world is dead.
Yeah.
It's, at the same, I say that and I would totally agree with that, but I also understand why he's doing it. The end state for all of us is predetermined. And I would suspect, having never talked to the guy, that he would rather meet his end like that than at 80 years old as a geriatric.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah. Maybe.
But that doesn't ease the burden on the people around him. And that's the piece that was the toughest for me when it came to wingsuit base jumping.
Look at him there.
It's insane.
What is wrong with that, man? But meanwhile, he's such a nice guy. When you talk to Alex in real life, he's a sweetheart. You root for him to quit. Like, look, man, you already did it. Stop.
I've yet to hear him express desire to do so, though.
He's not quitting. I don't know, man. Everybody's built different. That's the thing,
Yeah.
We're all not. I don't mean physically. The way your brain ticks. Everyone just has a different thing going on. What leads you to what you do? Like, what is it about you? Sometimes you look at your path in life, and you look at where you are right now, and you go, "What the fuck led me to be in this spot where I'm 2,000 feet above the ground with my foot jammed into this wedge, looking up, and there's another 4,000 feet to go.
And I got a chalk bag.
You got a chalk bag. You got a chalk bag, and the sun goes down in 4 hours. Good luck.
No, thank you. Not enough money in the actual world. Yeah, my hands sweat talking about it, too. And like I said, I knew he was alive.
Yeah.
I knew the result, and it still freaked me out.
I think that it's one of the more interesting things about all paths in life is like what is it that leads someone to decide to be a surgeon? What leads someone to decide to be, fill in the blank, whatever the fuck you want to do? What leads someone to decide to want to climb mountains? There's the way human beings vary and the way human beings find comfort in whatever path that they choose, whether it's you doing wingsuit jumping or like some people, public speaking is so terrifying for them that the idea of doing stand-up is just horrific. Like I've had friends that come to see me at the Comedy Store and I'll be talking to them right before I go on stage and they're like, do you have to prepare? I'm like, I'm all right. Don't worry. I've been doing this. I can do it. I do it all the time. So I do it because I've done it so often. I could just go and do it. Whereas if they had to do it for the first, there's a look on a person's face when you see them go on stage and they've never done it before. Like if you go to open mic night, you can see it, the sheer panic and terror in their face. But you're like, meanwhile, there's no consequences. What is going to happen? People are not going to like you?
Yeah,
they're not even going to remember you, man.
Boo.
Yeah. You get off that stage, you're fine. He might fall to his death from a fucking giant mountain that he didn't have to climb.
Yeah.
Like that's real consequences. But for him, for some people, the public speaking thing would be more terrifying than that.
I was going to say, put him in that environment like, Alex, you're not going to climb today. You're going to do a 5-minute set at the Comedy Store.
I think Alex would be fine doing it because he actually, I think he's doing a podcast now. Didn't he say he's doing a podcast? I think so. I'm pretty sure he said he's doing a podcast.
Did you tell
now.
him he should start one?
Probably.
Because I think you've spawned thousands of podcasts.
Well, I spawned a bunch of good ones, though.
Way. Yeah, in a positive. I say that it's amazing to me the influence that you have. It is unbelievable. The number of people like I started this because I heard Joe talk. I'm like, okay, cool.
It's uncomfortable. Like I don't think about it because if I did think about it, it'd freak me out. I've said so much stupid shit. The fact that anybody would listen to me about anything. There's thousands of hours of me talking out of my ass.
Why'd you decide to start one in the first place?
Just for fun. And just to fuck around. I was a little disenchanted. Had to come back to LA from Colorado, and I didn't want to, but it was just one of those things. And when I was starting it, it was really just a goof. I'd always wanted to do something like that because my friend Anthony Cumia, he was from Opie and Anthony. He had a setup in his basement, And he would do this thing. He would call it Live from the Compound from his house. He had a green screen, and he had he built a set in the basement. I was like, wow, if he could do that. Like, I didn't have the money to do anything like that at the time, but I was like, but if he could do that, like, maybe I could figure out how to do something like that. So I just started off slow with webcams and shit like that, and stumbled my way through it.
I personally believe that Jerry, number one, should be put into a digital time capsule and saved forever. It's one of my favorite things on YouTube to
It's
watch.
terrible. What's amazing how bad
No, it gives
I was.
normal people like me hope. You're like, yes.
Yeah, well, you get better at everything.
Yeah.
You really do. And I've gotten, I mean, just in the last few years, I've gotten so much better at listening to people and understanding what they're in, and trying to see things from their perspective and trying to ask questions that get them to expand on their ideas better.
Yeah.
It's given me an insane education in as far as in a bunch of ways, not just in terms of gathering information, but also in terms of how people react to that information, and human psychology and how human beings react to controversial subjects, or and how they forgive people for mistakes too. That's an interesting one for me. Like, there's some people that have such an unwillingness to forgive people, and they have no empathy or compassion. Those people are confusing to me, because I'm like, look, I know you fucked up. I know somewhere, maybe that's not
for sure.
Maybe it's not digitally recorded like other people's fuck up, so you think you're safe, but you fucked up. So you're being a hypocrite. You're all like, it's when someone gets busted, it's really interesting. When someone like there's just so much opportunity. And one of the things that I was talking about with Jack Dorsey from
I was going to bring that up, actually.
Twitter. One of the things that I was talking with him about was how everything, like literally from here forth, will exist forever. And we're going to have to figure out a way to recognize that someone from 10 years ago, when you were a 15-year-old kid, you made some crazy fucking tweet. You're not that same person now, and you can't just break like that. Didn't that happen with people, with athletes recently? They were giving them shit for stuff that they wrote when they were teenagers. But there was some big case, right? Wasn't there something recently where a Heisman Trophy winner, they were giving him a hard time for some of his past tweets?
Yeah, I was going to say it comes up maybe once every other 2 weeks.
And they want to make it like the guy just said it yesterday.
Yeah, but I've already talked about it. There's no path to redemption for those people.
That's a real problem, and I think there should be a path to redemption for virtually everyone who's not murdering or raping people. You're not stealing. Like, people make mistakes. We are all human. We're all super flawed, and to deny that seems like a real. It's going to be a real problem in terms of progress in the future. And I think that's one of the things that we were talking about earlier in terms of, people disagreeing with on the left or the right. And we've got to figure out a way to communicate with each other more civilly, and to like approach people, like, instead of approaching someone's actions and who they are like they're the enemy. Instead of that, look at them with the most compassionate or forgiving view possible, and look at the things that you have in common rather than the things that are inexorably separating you.
I would like to think that most people actually do that. I think that, unfortunately, extremism is winning in the country.
Yeah.
And the vocal minority just has a much larger megaphone or microphone than the non-vocal majority. I think most people do that, but I don't think the people that do that waste their time posting about it or taking up just filling the narrative so it looks like there's only two positions.
That's a good point.
I would love to see some return to moderation, or just get extremism in any shape. I feel very uncomfortable with people who go to any length like that.
Well, I think people are getting more and more upset at it. And I think as people recognize it's more and more preposterous, they're getting more and more, there's more and more pushback and resistance. What's really interesting with progressivism is that people are getting in trouble now for things that seem like there's something, like Martina Navratilova just got a bunch of shit from people calling her transphobic because she was saying that she didn't think that biological males should be competing with biological females, and that there are people who identify as transgender who keep their penis and compete as a man. And her position was like that, or compete as a woman rather. Her position was like that. Listen, that's not a woman. That's a man. and they have an advantage. And she was citing all these instances, and so she got all this shit from people. So then she said, I'm going to step back and I'm going to research this. So she stepped back and researched it and then came back and said, no, I've looked at all the data now.
She probably came back harder.
She did come back harder.
Yep.
And now they're attacking her and calling her transphobic. Like, listen, this is not transphobia. This is a real thing that you're going to have to address when you're talking about physical activities. When someone identifies. Look, if you want to identify as a woman or identify as a male, I think we should all support people doing whatever they want to do as long as it's not hurting anybody.
Totally agree.
But when you're talking about competition and you're talking about someone identifying, I don't care if you identify as a giraffe. If you compete in an apple picking competition with a giraffe, you're going to fucking lose. You're not a giraffe, stupid. Right? I mean, this is an extreme version of it, but that's nonsense. That doesn't make any sense. If you decide that you're a woman and you want to enter into a fucking weightlifting competition and you weigh 220 pounds and you're beating all the other women by like fucking insane numbers. Like there was a few world champion weightlifting winners that are women that are actually biologically male. So they're winning weightlifting competitions. Just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, this is crazy. This is not a matter of whether or not someone should identify with something, but you're talking about making it fair for actual biological women. Like, there's a reason why women don't compete with men. It's because physically they're not as strong. So, and obviously there's some exceptions. There's some weak men, there's some strong women, and there's some sort of a spectrum, and you find yourself somewhere on it. But if you're allowing biological males to compete with biological females and just say, oh, he identifies as a woman, let him in, yay, we're all being very progressive. And then you look at the results and you go, wait, he just broke all the world records first time in? Like, what? And everyone's like, yes, amazing. What a wonderful woman. Girl power. Like, that's not girl power. You're monkeying with biology here. This is crazy.
So what's the route? What's the road out of that? Like, what does that
People
lead?
getting upset and time being time, of these instances. Enough of these things happen, enough discussion where enough of the actual reality of the facts and the data are shoved in everyone's face enough that the new generation comes to some sort of a rational understanding about what is and is not fair, as opposed to where people are now, where they're just, no matter what, they're scared to not push this progressive agenda, and they're scared of the blowback of Martina Navratilova, who is an LBGT hero, right?
Yes.
She's a fucking hero. She was a lesbian woman who was a world champion tennis player, and now the left are attacking her. So they're eating their own in a spectacular fashion, where you have these trans people who don't want to look at reality, and then people that support the trans people because they don't want to be considered in any way, shape, or form anything other than the most progressive of progressive. And it's nonsense. It's like,
I think you're right, though, in the generational fix to it. I think that's true of a lot of the stuff that, like, one of the I get asked all the time, school shootings, right? It's like the topic of the day.
Yeah.
I don't have a solution for it, but I know it's not going to be overnight. It'll be generational in nature, just like it crept in generational in nature. I think a lot of these problems, people look for a light switch solution, where the solution in and of itself is the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't see any solution to that either. And I think there's a lot of positions that people feel like they're supposed to take. And if you're on the left, the big position that you're supposed to take is gun control. Get rid of the guns. The guns are the problem. Look at all these people shooting people with guns.
Yep.
Guns, guns, guns. And all the mass shootings, what do they have in common? Guns. They all have guns in common. And they want to take away guns. And then there's the people on the right, and like, you're not gonna, I've never done anything wrong with my gun. You're not taking my fucking gun. And then there's this fucking unstoppable battle between these two sides. And that there's a lot of factors. Like, what happens to a human that leads them to get to this state of mind where they're able to go into a school and shoot it up? Like, what is that? What could possibly be going on? How do we stop that from ever taking place? These people have to be in some sort of insane pain. There has to be something unbelievably wrong with their life that they're capable of doing this. How do we stop that? How do we look at that as like, if this is our global community, if this is our national community, how do we stop this from happening in our national community? I don't know what the answer to that is.
I think there's an answer to stopping school shootings, and not to oversimplify anything. I would say there's a couple key issues. One of them is location. The other one is motivation. You can solve the location issue. Like if we as a country were legitimately interested in stopping school shootings, how many have ever occurred at a school where the president's children go? 0. Why? Because it's defended, right? They actually take a proactive approach to it. They're going to have layers of security, defense in depth. They're probably going to have somebody looking out the front door or a system looking out the front door, controlled entry points, entry and exit points. You're going to have a metal detector. You're going to have security staff on site.
Right.
So you can control the location aspect. And I go to every time I'm at my kid's school, or unfortunately or fortunately, every building I've ever been in, I'm viewing it from a pseudo-tactical perspective at least. So I'll go walk around my kid's school. And there's issues that I see from a perspective of somebody who would want to exploit that from an aggressor's perspective. But they could all be solved. But that doesn't solve the second aspect of that, the motivation. Because I have absolutely no answer as to why a 17-year-old kid would think that a solution of any kind would be to kill their classmates. I don't understand that at all. And although people, it's funny, like at every shooting, surprisingly enough, there's 2 things, a gun and a shooter. And vast majority of the time, I hear people talking about the gun.
Yeah.
I think we got to balance that conversation and talk about the motivation.
Yeah, 100%. And then also psych medications. You know, you got to talk about that. The rise in psych medications got to be correlated with the rise of school shootings. I mean, the amount of people that are on psych medication, and I understand that correlation does not equal causation. Yep. It's not necessarily that the medication's forcing them to do this. But I don't know what study has been done on what is the effect, and is there some sort of a connection other than the fact that they're all on medication? Is there some sort of a connection between taking certain types of psych medication with certain biological makeup that allows you to have this diffusion of reality, like this there's just some weird thing happens to them where they're capable of horrific things and horrific actions. Like, how much of that is monkeying with human neurochemistry? I don't know. That's
why I think the location portion, it's not that it's an easy solution, but it is solvable.
But isn't the problem funding? Like, there's no money to pay for teachers. They don't have money to like secure schools.
It depends on how serious we want to take it. Yeah, if we really wanted to stop it, what I'm saying is there are ways that can stop it. I'm not saying those ways are easy. I'm not saying that those ways are cheap, but there are concrete things. Just looking at a structure from being vulnerable to an assault, there are things that could be done. But that doesn't solve the school shooting problem.
Right.
It changes the address. Because the individual that would want to go do that at a school, if you make a target hard, that doesn't remove the motivation. That's what I'm saying. There's location, motivation, and obviously a lot of other factors. The location one, if you solve that, you still got to talk about the shooter.
Right.
And I mean, that's where I butt my head up again. I would actually like to see this country have a conversation instead of entrenched positions, either the left or the right. All guns should be banned. Come get them with my cold dead hands.
Right.
Which I don't, again, I find myself in the middle of that. I don't agree with either of those positions because it's more nuanced than just the gun and the shooter. It's the combination of all those things. But I don't even feel like we're having a conversation in this country. I feel like a lot of people are talking. I don't think anybody is listening. And I go to the schools in the neighborhood where my kids go to school. I don't see a single change that they have made.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct in that there doesn't seem to be there's no real plans to stop this stuff, and I don't think anybody has a real answer. And that's one of the reasons why it's so confusing to people, because you could dwell on it and roll it over in your head all day long, and there's nothing that stands out as obvious. Like, hey, there's a fire, go pour water on it. That's obvious. There's no solution like that.
And the low-hanging fruit, the metaphor for the school shootings would be there's a gun, go pour water on that.
Right.
But the more nuanced and complex problem is actually the human being behind it. And I see people, that's too difficult, so I'm going to throw my hands up and give up.
Yeah.
I mean, but also too, I think it's important to point out that actually thankfully, it's incredibly rare that it actually happens. And it's funny because you look at the stats and you start digging into where the stats come from, and two groups of people, and I'm sure you see this across a variety of topics, will take the same study and derive two different sets of numbers. There's school shootings, and then there's shootings that happen at schools. And you can make one number look bigger and one number look smaller. Like if you wanted to include the number of people who commit suicide in a school parking lot, which at a national level is considered a school shooting because it occurred at a school, you can inflate and conflate the number of times and the frequency with which it happens. If you strip that information out, it gives you a much more accurate perspective of how often it's happening. Same thing when you remove suicides from gun violence and the total number of deaths. So, but again, that takes a refined and nuanced person that's willing to actually look at it as opposed to just repeating what their bumper sticker says.
Yeah, I saw that when Ted Nugent debated Pierce Morgan on television. He was talking to him about gun violence and the actual numbers, and he was saying, well, these are the real statistics, and this is why the numbers are so high. How many of these, when you're including gun violence, how many of these people are like criminals who are being shot in the act by police officers? How many of them are people defending their home from a break-in? How many of them are suicides? And then once you get through that, you get to the end of it, then you get to gang violence. How many of them are responsible? How many deaths are attributed to gang violence? How many deaths are attributed to I mean, there's a lot of different factors. Then you get to these mass shootings.
Yep.
So the mass shootings, it's a relatively small percentage, but that doesn't give anybody any comfort for anybody that's suffered.
Of course,
Yeah.
it does. And again, it doesn't excuse it. It's just, thankfully, it happens infrequently. I wish the number was zero. We're not, I think the answer to getting it to zero will be generational because it grew generationally.
Yeah.
I think it will go away generationally.
But how does it go to what fundamental changes have to happen in the way human beings exist that we stop anything that right now all the different, I mean, it would be a terrible world if we said, hey, we're just going to have to accept that people are never going to evolve socially, emotionally, whatever it is that's causing people to lash out the way they do. What a horrible world it would be if we say, no, that people are just going to be like this forever. We're not just flawed, but flawed and ruthless and cruel and violent and awful, and that's just the way people are forever.
I mean, I think there's improvements you can make on both sides, right? So there's a gun and there's a shooter. I couldn't be a more vehement supporter of the Second Amendment. Like, I completely and utterly support it, but I'm anti-irresponsibility.
Yeah. And
there's a lot of things that we could do as a nation that would improve safety via responsibility. I mean, look at this, the stats on the percentage of American gun owners that don't own a safe. It's over 50%.
Yeah.
Which speaks to access. And what sucks about any improvements that we make, you'll never know about it because you're never going to know about the school shooting that you stopped, really. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because it doesn't make the news. But that doesn't mean my default position is we can do better. There's ways that we could, I think that the reasonable gun legislation that already exists, there's ways that we could improve communication interagency. Like the Aurora shooter is a perfect example. It took a pistol in, killed 5 people the day he got fired, and injured 5 police officers. He shouldn't have had the gun. He was a convicted felon. His felony did not show up when they had the background check for his job, but it did show up for the background check, I believe, for his concealed weapons permit. But oftentimes I see it where there's this disconnect between agencies not sharing information, very much like the civilian military infrastructure prior to 9/11. Agency didn't want to talk to the FBI and the NSA because budget and relevancy and this is mine and that's yours and this is my rights. Well, get the fuck away from me. I don't want to share information. I think we could do better on the regulations that are in place. I'm not saying add any more, but maybe let's figure out a way where we could share information or at least make sure we're living up to the letter of the intent and the letter of the law on that side of the house. And then on the other side of the house, you had a pinned tweet for a long time, and I'm going to totally murder this when it comes to exactly what it was, but something along is we don't have a gun crisis, we have a mental health crisis.
I say we have a mental health crisis disguised as a gun crisis, or a mental health problem disguised as a gun problem. Yeah.
And just like we can do better on the firearm side of the house, we can do better on the mental health side of the house. And I just see people throwing their hands up and attacking the low-hanging fruit because I think the mental health side of the house is a more difficult issue than the firearm issue.
I think it's the most difficult issue. And I think everyone that I know, including myself, has had bad moments in their life and has struggled. And the struggle, especially mental health struggle with depression or being unhappy or anger or any of the things that keep you off of a healthy baseline, those moments in life they vary wildly in how people experience them, to what level people experience them, what impact they have on them, and whether or not they can recover from these things. And for some people, they feel like there is no recovery, and the only way out is to just go out with a bang, like literally. And this is a lot of what you're seeing in these school shootings is suicide by cop.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of the things that people want. They want to go out in a blaze of glory. And what the fuck is going on where we let people get to that point without stepping in and trying to help? And do they have anybody that even notices? Do they have anyone around them that knows that they're this fucked up and this far gone? You know, I mean, we all like to think that could never happen to us, that we could never get to a point where we're so despondent and filled with anger and hate and fear and self-loathing that we want to do something horrific. But every person who does something horrific is a human being, right? And the difference between you and them might be genetic, it might be environmental, it might be life experience, but they are a human being, just like you and I, and something horrifically went wrong in their life to the point where they are in this position where they show up at that school shooting in Illinois just a couple of days ago. Some guy got fired. Went back to work and just shot everybody up. Like, what the fuck? That guy worked there for 15 years. Like, what is it that gets when someone gets to a point where this is what flashes in their mind as a solution? Go back with a gun, make everybody pay.
I felt it myself, that feeling. Overseas, when I lose close friends, the first absolute feeling you have is an anger that I don't have the vocabulary to describe, and all you want to do is burn the world to the ground. But it was fleeting, and I didn't do it. And I just don't know how we provide the barrier for people, if they can. And when it comes to mental health, I mean, somebody with more horsepower between the ears than me is going to need to solve that problem, because I don't understand it. But I do understand that feeling. But what I needed was time, and I don't know how to provide that.
Well, you also had character and discipline and a lot of things that many people lack in your ability to mitigate these horrific feelings and this severe depression and anger. Some people don't have those mental health tools. They don't have those tools. I mean, you're already a SEAL, right? You're already a guy who's endured more than most human beings will ever in terms of physically and emotionally, and how to get through that hump to become one of the elite operators in this country. That just having that as a baseline, like having that as you have the tool set to endure more than most. Some people are just not capable of handling any real adversity. Anything bad that comes down the pipe for them, they just fall apart. And I think for many people, there's a real extreme feeling of a lack of purpose in life. There's an extreme feeling of a lack of meaning, that nothing they do matters, that they don't matter, that no one cares about them, whether they're there or they're gone. People either mock them or disregard them altogether, and they want people to know who they are, and that's one of the reasons why they do these things.
I can see that for sure, but again, if I'm being objectively honest about myself, I did have those tools, and probably the only thing that prevented me from acting out in that moment is that I didn't have access to the individuals that I wanted to act out against. And I mean, it's like I said, I understand it. I don't have a solution for it at all, but I understand it.
Yeah, well, you would be able to understand it more than most in coming from that place of having lost friends and being in that intense, and also being in this environment where people are shooting and killing people on a regular basis, and you're directly a part of that and directly connected to it. It makes violence so much more tangible.
Well, I mean, at the same time, I don't want to paint a horrible picture. There's a ton of misconceptions about what I used to do, right? And it comes from books and movies and TV shows, because in 60 Minutes, all that happens is bullets whizzing by your head and shit blowing up. The reality is you're not exposed to violence that often overseas. You are over a long term, I guess, in the aggregate, but it's not as bad as people I think often would maybe want to romanticize it as being bad, because then they can maybe excuse away behaviors that come from that.
Does that bother you about movies when you see movies about?
God. You should, if if my wife was here, all you'd have to say is, "Do you enjoy watching a war movie with your husband?" She's like, "Oh my God." She just like, get out of the room, because I can't do it. Like it drives me nuts, but it also sets bad expectations. I mean, I had some of the best times of my life overseas as well. And it wasn't all about loss, and it certainly wasn't all about loss of life. There'd be whirlwind periods of time where that happened, and there'd be other periods of time where we're just training people, or we're going out and actually meeting leaders in the city and having meals with them. And then, that night you might get your stuff on and go banging for a night. But at the same time, it's a mix of all of those things. I'm grateful for the experiences that I have from my military service. Probably the best day of my life was the day I got shot. It changed my perspective of who I thought I was. It forced me to lift my head up and think about the future more than just the job that I had, because my ability to do my job was thrown into my face. I thought I was, once I realized I wasn't going to die, I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to do the job I've always wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I started thinking about the future. Again, I would not be sitting here talking to you today if I hadn't have been shot. And when it happened in that moment, it was the worst day of my life. And I look back on it, it probably was maybe it wasn't the best day of my life, but perhaps one of the most meaningful changes in direction for me as a human being. So there is positive that comes out of that negative. It's not all bad. I think I got more positive, more good than bad from 15 years at war.
It's interesting that does happen, right? That some bad moment in your life could lead to a greater life overall.
Yeah. Complete shift in perspective. I had never thought about anything in my life except an unsatiable desire to be a SEAL. And then I became a SEAL. I'm like, this is awesome, because it was pre 9/11. So we just worked out, drank, and then worked out and drank. And then 9/11 happened, and my world went from conceptual to practical. And it was way different than I thought it was going to be, because I'd watched the same movies.
Right.
And then you get over there and you're like, oh, whoa, this is substantially different. And it built, and it was a lot of the things that I thought it wasn't going to be, and even more than I thought it possibly could be in some of those directions. But I don't know. People, I think, often paint war or the experiences associated with war as solely negative. And I also, just like when it comes to the conversations on being on the extremes, I would love to pull that more back into the middle and actually have a conversation about it. I think amazing changes can come from people in those environments.
What is it about war movies that drive you the most crazy?
The fact that almost everything in them is inaccurate.
Almost everything?
The biggest thing that drives me fucking crazy is when grenades create a fireball.
Really?
Well, yeah, because it happens in like every movie. They throw a grenade and a 55-gallon drum of gasoline explodes.
Right.
And people go flying backwards and cars flip over. If you throw a grenade, it goes pop, and it puts some dust up in the air. And if you're waiting for the fireball, you're going to be there for the rest of your natural life. It's just not going. And they're not that effective. They're fun, don't get me wrong, but they're not that effective.
I did not know that they don't create a fireball.
No.
I've never seen a grenade go off, obviously.
I'm sure Jamie can pull one up. It just goes, poof, it's dust. Is all it is.
I think I've seen one in a video of them.
I'm sure for a moment, like the momentary explosion, there's a flash. But other than that, it's literally just dust flying up in the air.
What is the best military movie that's the most accurate or the least offensive?
Navy SEALs starring Charlie Sheen.
Really?
No, not at all.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I almost fell down.
That fucking guy probably fooled more people into coming into the SEAL teams than anybody else.
Really?
Oh, my God.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, he's falling through skylights with MP5s and handlebar mustaches. You know, there's snipers calling himself God. I can't see anything. I'm switching to Starlight, blasting people through a concrete wall. They're doing free fall jumps. They're in submarines. Like, that's an entire 30-year career to do all that shit in 60 minutes. Like, you take that expectation, you come to the teams, you're like, God, I'm kind of bored right now.
So is that the war area? Is
There
Charlie
is.
Sheen.
Get
Bang,
it.
bang, bang, bang. Look at him. I'm going to run, boys.
Yep.
I want to make it. And he's got the requisite scarf around the neck.
And
You
first
have to
off,
have one of those.
So what kind of asshole wears a red scarf in an environment where there's no red?
Yeah,
he's got
that's
green utilities on from Vietnam,
Yeah,
wearing
wow.
a red
Look at that guy.
chamal. Yeah.
This is so hilarious.
So another one,
especially when you know Charlie now, like such a
Oh, God.
fucking psychotic partier, and
So apparently, so they came to the Buds compound and did a little bit of training with the guys, and I guess there was some bathroom breaks, and they just like, all right, you guys ready for some more PT?
Oh, really? That makes sense.
I'm obviously hearing that 18th hand, but I want to believe it's true.
Well, you know who I hear trains diligently and really hard, and like takes it super seriously, and is like one of the most humble guys you ever meet is Keanu Reeves.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me either. But I heard some people that have had interacted with him when he was training for
John Wick.
Including my jiu-jitsu instructor, John Jacques Machado, my friend Higa Machado's, John Jacques' brother, and a bunch of other. He worked out with a bunch of the Machados. In fact, I think Carlos as well. But he really wanted to learn actual jiu-jitsu, so he really did train with them. Yeah, he did real tactical courses,
and so his tactical proficiency shows in that movie. And so to get back to stuff that bothers me, it's the 72 round pistol magazine. Because I'm counting, I'm like, that's 15, 25, 30. Or the shotgun that has 48 rounds in it. So like, I can't do it. I'm like throwing stuff at the TV. My wife just points. She says, get out. Like, I can't do it. Like, so Sicario, I love Sicario. There's a scene at the border that has one of the most blatant just errors in the movie. There's a guy pointing a gun. He's supposedly a CIA agent. He's pointing a gun out the windshield, and you can see that the bolt to the rifle is locked to the rear.
Oh, no.
Which means the armor on set handed it to him, clear and safe, and he just went and they filmed it, and nobody caught it. And I saw that movie. I'm like, turn that shit off. I can't watch it anymore.
Of course, yeah.
It ruins it for me.
Now, why don't they fix stuff like that? You would think that you're making a movie about military or about guns. Like, the real gun nuts are going to notice that.
But they probably didn't catch it in the editing process. It's so fast. It's probably up there for 3 seconds. But if you know, I mean, you look at a gun and like you just if it was your primary tool for years, you're looking for certain things all the time. Yep, here we go.
For someone who doesn't know, though, it looks super serious.
Well, that's why they're still watching the movie and I left.
Yeah.
Yep, bolt to the rear.
Ah!
See that? Is. Yep. Walk to the rear.
Yep.
Go ahead and pull the trigger there.
Go ahead, son. That shit ain't...
Obviously an empty magazine.
Yeah, hey, silly.
Yeah. So nobody caught that in the editing process is what it is.
How the fuck did they not see that? No, don't you think they digitally could have moved that forward?
They 100% could have moved it because he didn't fire in that scene anyway.
Yeah, just push that bitch up. Just Photoshop that sucker.
I gotta get anxiety.
I mean, they can use... You get angry, right? It makes sense. Hey, man, in a way less significant thing, I get crazy when I watch people play pool in movies that obviously can't play.
Oh, I can imagine.
Drives me nuts.
Yes.
Drives me nuts. Like if I see someone like supposed to be some pool hustler, and I see they have a bullshit bridge and they're gripping the like you can see things in movies like my friends who smoke cigarettes say they can tell when someone doesn't smoke.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, because when you smoke, there's just like a casual, relaxed way that you're holding the cigarette and the way you're drawing it. But when someone's like, never smoked before, and they're like,
yeah,
they've got this weird thing they're doing. Like, oh, that guy doesn't really smoke. I'm like, how the fuck can you tell it? Because I smoke.
It's like another thing that bugs me is you watch any tactical scene where they're like moving down a hallway, and it's like, why is your gun pointed at your buddy's face? Like, that's not cool. Yes, why are you aiming across? Like, and then the way that they make entry into rooms, it's like awesome. I like to play Russian roulette with my life as well. Like, it just drives me absolutely.
What about Zero Dark 30?
That movie fucking sucks.
What sucks about it? You know what drove me crazy? That
How
lady,
much time do we have?
That redhead lady was yelling at all those trained killers. I was like, I don't think they'd listen to her.
There are some creative liberties that are taken in that movie from soup to nuts. I mean,
like, was that person the lady who yelled at those guys? The woman who's in charge. Was that a real human in real life?
It was based off of a real human for sure. Like a lot of the things in that movie were based on real events. However, if you're trying to get tickets to get people's seats, their butts and seats, you got to glamorize stuff.
Right.
So a lot of people, because in that movie, the source drives up in the vehicle and detonates himself. That actually happened. That killed a bunch of people in Koust. If as long as you look at it as entertainment, that movie is okay. If you look at it with a refined eye, like, are they doing this correctly? No. They're all going to die.
Yeah.
I mean, it's it just we would need another 4 hours to literally go down the list of things, but it's just things are compressed. Things that would never happen for the sake of creating an intoxicating or emotional scene on camera, and it's tough to watch because I'm sitting there. I'm like, get out of the door, get out of the door, get out of the door. I'm getting anxiety watching these damn movies because you don't hang out in front of open doors unless you want to get shot.
Now, how many different things were fucked up about that movie?
Only the things that were after the opening scene.
So the whole movie is a disaster?
Yeah, it's just, I don't want to talk about it anymore.
See, a dumbass like myself, I'm like, that's a good fucking movie. Seems pretty realistic.
Well, think about it from entertainment. It's
Yeah.
a great entertaining movie.
Right.
I get asked the same question about the movie American Sniper or Lone Survivor. They're all based around certain things that have been enhanced to make it more entertaining.
Yes.
And I get it. They're there to make money. They're not there to tell historically accurate.
Do you know
tale.
Marcus?
I do not know Marcus well, but I do know Marcus.
I know him. I don't know how he felt. I don't know if he would ever say.
He was
how
involved with the
felt
making
about
of
the
it.
movie. Yeah, but I mean, I'm sure they only listened to him so much, you know?
Yeah. Given how I can, again, having not been there, and I can only imagine how horrific that incident must be for him to deal with on a daily level, I would bet he wasn't very involved. I would almost rather them, if that was me, I think I would almost rather say, you know what? Just make the movie that you want to make. Because I don't want to sit here and explain exactly what happened and recreate these scenes and talk about how this person died over here. Like I would just go, go to town.
Is there any movie that you've ever seen about war where you go, that makes sense?
First 10 minutes of Saving Private Ryan is unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
Not for accuracy, for capturing the essence of what it feels like. And the switch between utter fear to excitement to joy to anger in the matter of a second. Another movie that does a good aspect or a good job of capturing some of those aspects, I would say, is also Black Hawk Down. Not for accuracy, but to capture the chaos of how a plan can come unraveled and how chaotic it can be, and that's how sometimes you can feel so helpless, but your only solution is to drive into the problem instead of moving away from it. So those capture the essence of it well. From a technical perspective, I honestly cannot think of a single movie that does it justice.
Wow.
It would have to be like a 50-hour movie, though, because
Of course.
I mean, Black Hawk Down, I think, was a multiple day incident, and that movie is 90 minutes.
Right.
So they get rid of all the boring BS stuff that is actually what you do the vast majority of your job. If I look at my career, probably greater than 95% of my career I spent training, and then 5% I spent in combat.
Really?
Yep. And that is average. I would say there are people who are maybe a little bit higher and people who are a little bit lower. But you're not going to spend more than, at most, maybe 10% of your career in combat, even if your job is directly tied to combat. Because you got to train. You got to plan the missions. I mean, our normal planning cycle was 24 to 72 hours. Sitting in front of PowerPoint, considering whether or not I should hang myself or blow my brains out because we're arguing over the font that we're using to submit for mission approval.
Really?
Oh, you're studying the weather. You're studying the terrain. I've had slides and mission briefs sent back not be approved because I didn't orient the helicopter the correct direction on the slide. They're like, hey, you need to fix this and then resubmit it. Like if you wanted to shut down the average day military, it wouldn't be through a kinetic act. You would need to put some type of code into Microsoft Office and we're done. Because we operate on Microsoft PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, and Microsoft Office. We'd sit there and we'd plan and we would brief and we'd submit for approval. That's 3 days. Then you'd go do an objective that would last for 10 hours.
Whoa.
Repeat the cycle.
I'm too ADD for that.
You break up the tasks. So the last thing you would want is one person creating the entire plan. So somebody's doing the communication plan, the medevac plan, the insertion plan, the route planning. We don't ever really brief what we're going to do inside of the objective because that's kind of the soup and nuts that you train for at all times. Like everything is to get there and then, okay, that's actually our job. But we focus on all those other things. Then primary, secondary, tertiary plan for each one of those things. Phase lines for each one of those things. None of that has ever shown up in any movie. What doesn't show up in any movies is vast majority of time the intelligence is bad and you hit what's called a dry hole. You go to a building, you approach the structure, you breach the door, and it's just the intelligence is wrong. It's either empty or it's the wrong person. That happens all the time. It's not exciting though. So we pay the people money, they fix their door, and we go back and we try to find the person again. None of that shows up in any of the mediums because they're too compressed.
With all your experience in the military and your knowledge of what the real world in these combat environments is like, how do you feel when you hear people talk about defunding the military or decreasing the military, or that we don't need it, or that we shouldn't have the kind of budget that we have right now? The people that don't understand the real threats that are out there, and that if you do not have a well-trained, well-funded, experienced military that really understands these things, you've got real danger at your door.
Yep. I'm glad that they live in a place where they have enough space to develop those thoughts, because they're not under pressure, because the military is doing the job that they should be doing. There are, like I said, so many misconceptions about what the military does, what we do overseas, how many countries we are in overseas, how deep we are into some of these countries, how forecasted and how forward-looking the military is, looking for emerging threats as opposed to just responding. And all of that creates space so people can exercise their right to voice their First Amendment, right of saying those things.
Does it frustrate you though that they don't have a real understanding?
I'm grateful that they live in a place where they don't have that great understanding, because like I said, they have the space to be confused. They're not pushed under a thumb. They're not being told you have to say this or it's going to be your fucking head in the square.
Right.
It is frustrating for me at times, but I balance that with that's what this country is supposed to be about. You're supposed to be able to voice your dissent, right? And I believe that the system will correct, and it does correct for itself. There are people that believe that, but I think the majority of people, again, silent majority versus extreme minority. I think those people are in the extreme minority, but they're very vocal. I think most people are incredibly appreciative of what the military does. But having said that, if you've never served in the military and you've never been in a combat occupation, and then you've never applied that occupation for real, there's going to be a gap, and there's going to be a gap in understanding, and that's okay. So it's frustrating, yes, but I'm glad that it exists, and I'm glad that they are not, and this country is not in a position where they are getting drafted and forced into that position. I'm glad that it was me that did that and had to bear any weight or burden that came with that to allow them to have whatever opinion they want.
That's a great perspective. That's a very healthy way of looking at it. And I probably think it's probably the only manageable way of looking at it.
I think you would go crazy otherwise, because otherwise, and then what are you going to do? Go to a rally and hold up another? Like, it's like, what's... Right. Because initially I have to fight back the initial anger, but eventually give me a little bit of time, and the hopefully relatively sane head is going to prevail. And I had again that night I got hurt. It changed the way that I thought about things. If I had never gotten hurt, and I had never thought about my own mortality, and I had never thought about, I spent a lot of time thinking about whether or not what I did in the military has had any impact. 0.0001. I don't know if I would have thought about that if all I had ever done was just doing the occupation that I did. I needed that lifting of my head to have that perspective. I did. I don't think all people do, but I needed that.
How long did... sorry, keep going.
I was going to say, I think that night, in some ways, helps me have the perspective I have now with those people.
How long is the average career of someone who's a SEAL?
Well, if you want to retire, you got to do 20 years in a wake up. And they should change
What's a wake up?
Wake up the next day. You got to do 20 years.
Oh.
You have to do 20 years to the day. So wake up the day after your 20th. But they need to change the term also. Retirement pay in the military should be, in my opinion at least, replaced with money that you are going to get paid until you find your second career. Because you're not going to retire on $3,000 a month.
Right.
But if you want to make it to retirement, you have to do 20 years. The only reason I get a retirement is because I was medically retired. So they basically... I don't know how it happens in the system, but they put me in that category as essentially have made it 20 years.
What happens with most guys when they hit 20 years? Do they retire?
It's hit or miss. On the enlisted side of the house, they start throwing what at that phase of your life is going to be a lot of money at you. They'll try to get you to re-enlist. And I never took this money, and so I'm not exactly sure, but it's about 5 years of re-enlistment, and it's about 150 grand, which is a ton of money if you're in the military. And if you re-enlist while you're overseas, every penny of that is tax-free because you're going to get it in increments per year.
150 per year?
Total.
For the 5 years?
Yeah.
Damn, that's not a lot of money. Risk
It's
your
not,
life.
here's the deal. It's a lot of money if you're used to having your head down and you're
Right.
used to making 90 a year and you're in your late 30s and you realize, oh my God, I could buy a house with that money, right? You'll take it.
Right.
And every year that you do over 20, they will add, I believe, 1/2 of a percentage point to your military retirement. So if you do 20 years in the military, you will get 50% of your base pay, which doesn't include the dive pay, demo pay, jump pay, hazardous duty pay, all the difference in money that I made. I get the exact same retirement, which is totally fine, and I signed up for this as a person who was in front of a radar scope for 20 years. We get the exact same paycheck at the end. If you do 21 years, you get 50.5. 22 years, 51%. So it keeps incrementally going up. So some guys will go up to 30. Most guys, by the time they get to 20, and I will say this, it depends on what's going on in the world. When it was peak wartime, 2007, 2009, not a lot of guys were getting out. Most of the guys were re-upping because they wanted to strap the boots back on and go back overseas. And they're like, hey, I'll re-enlist while I'm overseas, tax-free money. I get to go do what I want to do. It's a win-win. But most people, as the operational tempo has slowed, anecdotally, what I've seen is they are looking more towards the future, going to get out around 20. If not, they'll get out around 25 after they take that re-enlistment bonus. And if you're staying into like your 30s, you're in for the long haul.
When you look at the news, do you pay attention to potential conflicts internationally and the things that are going on?
Yes and no. I'm not looking at them to inform my opinion. I'm just kind of curious as to what the news agencies are reporting, because having lived on the other side of that and doing things that will eventually make the news days, weeks, or months later, the news is generally behind on that cycle. And the military does do a good job and has continued to do a better job of kind of forecasting those things and spreading out as much as necessary.
But do you see anything now? Like, I know Trump got a lot of criticism for saying they were going to pull troops out of Syria.
Yep.
And when you see, the debate about that, or possible actions against North Korea and all this kind of stuff, like how do you view this? I mean, obviously you view this as a guy who has served and's been overseas, but do you look at things like these are potential issues that are coming up and things you need to be concerned with?
The Syria the Syria one, there are guys from the community over there. They've been actively engaged. Iraq, it's funny. The news reported for a long time, we've withdrawn from Iraq. All U.S. troops are out of Iraq. No, they weren't. We've always had a presence there since we invaded in 2003. So, and I can go tit for tat on a lot of issues where the news gets it wrong, which is why I don't necessarily look at it for me to inform my opinion. Mm-hmm. Syria, certainly any area where we allow a place for, and the only word I have for it is evil, to grow, it's going to happen. The problem with the strategy that I see it is that actually, so we started in Afghanistan, and again, this is my opinion, not the military opinion, I can only speak for myself. We went into Afghanistan, we were incredibly effective. So we cut the head off of that snake, but it spawned 2 more. You go into Iraq. You can argue whether or not we were effective, but then all of a sudden we started seeing foreign fighters coming in from all of these different countries. And the tactics that we started seeing used in Iraq, like my first deployment to Afghanistan in 2002, it was not uncommon to drive around in vehicles that were not ballistic. They were not resistant to mines. Tacoma, a thin-skinned Tacoma. The bullet would zip right through. Fast forward to Afghanistan in 2008, and they're starting to see vehicles being detonated by bombs that we first saw in Iraq that were coming across the border into Syria, where they had the ability to allow, again, for lack of a better term, that evil to grow, to learn, to come across the border, to engage American forces, then to flee into a sovereign nation we couldn't do anything about. Then we started seeing that in Afghanistan. But we got effective anytime that these people would get together and have a large group, we'd get effective at either capturing them or killing them. So they realized they need to be disaggregate. So now we've spread this. I think the last stat that I saw was ISIS is in 64 countries. And the problem that I see with the U.S. military is that we're very, very good at going in and cutting the head off of the snake, but we're not good at creating and holding infrastructure. And the timeline required to hold that infrastructure is well beyond the palate, I think, of most Americans. And the best example I can point to is South Korea. We still have bases with an American presence in South Korea. That war ended decades ago. We still have bases in Germany. We have bases in Italy. Now, we're not necessarily using them for the same purposes, but if we really want to control that area, we have to be prepared to stay there for that long. And I don't think the U.S. military, one, has enough personnel to do that, and I don't think the American populace has the palate to allow that to happen.
Do you think that that's necessary, that in order to protect people from whether it's ISIS or whatever comes after ISIS? I mean, obviously ISIS is fairly recent, right?
We went to Al-Qaeda to ISIS, and they changed, to ISIL and all that. Yep.
And whatever could be next.
Yep.
So you feel like we have to maintain presence in that part of the world, period?
I think we should use the military as a measure of last resort. I think that war should be a measure of absolutely last resort, and I would love to see us evolve to a point where we use it less and less and less. I describe it as you're standing at a dam, and you can see a little spout coming out. Do you put your finger in the spout, knowing that it's not going to fix the problem, but it is going to buy you time to hopefully have somebody come and fix the dam, right? That's the option I would go for versus just leaving it as it is and allowing it to continue to weaken the dam, or another sprout would come out. My theory that the military is really well served to provide that space, to put that finger in that sprout. So yes, I think if we find an area where these ideologies are thriving, we have to do what is necessary to remove that ideology and hopefully destroy it. Not resettle it somewhere else, but actually destroy it. So yes, the short answer is absolutely. If we find areas where we can quash this down, we have to go. But I just hope that there's people smarter than me that have a much longer term strategy, because all we're doing, in my opinion, is the finger in the dam.
And is there a longer term strategy? Like when you see all the global conflicts, I mean, is there a time that we could, I mean, it sounds insane to say that there's never going to be a time where there's no war. It sounds like an insane thing to say.
I don't know if there's ever been a time, at least globally, not that the U.S. was involved, but I don't know if there's ever been a time where there hasn't been war.
I don't think there has.
I don't think there can be because, and I think we talked about this the first day I met you, there's X people and there's Y people. They're not going to get along. It doesn't matter what your belief is. You have an axis somewhere that has another belief. And if you go to the extreme end of that belief, that individual may be willing to take action against you, violent action against you for your belief. And I don't think there's a way around that because humans are just too diverse.
But is it possible that one day we'll move past this? I mean, is there any plans at all to try to facilitate some sort of a peaceful world civilization where, you know, all nations kind of get along in some sort of a mutually agreeable way? I mean, does anybody have some sort of 100-year plan? Isn't that hilarious that that's a funny thing to say?
I mean, they didn't brief me on it, if it exists, but
isn't that fucked though? I mean, human beings are always going to shoot and kill each other. We're always going to have war. Isn't that fucked?
Since the inception of human beings, it seems like, at least at some level, and thankfully it's microscopic in comparison to the overall total.
Right.
But it's happening. I think it's happened since man has been walking on Earth.
And the only way that we feel today that we can protect ourselves is to have the more dominant, more powerful military and to make sure that we're the ones that get to dictate whether or not evil flourishes.
Yeah, I mean, I would want I want the dominant ability of our military to continue to grow, but I'd like to see, and I think it's already moving in this direction, smaller, more surgical uses of it. The military, in my opinion, is not good at building infrastructure and holding terrain for a long period of time. It's just not what we're designed to do. Right? It's not the design of the military, for that matter.
What is the overall view about getting out of Syria?
It probably depends on the people that you ask.
What about people that you talk to?
Both sides of the coin. I will get answers from, I think we're making a difference to we're wasting our time. And I got that the initial invasion of Iraq, the initial invasion of Afghanistan. There is one of the things that I enjoyed about the community I came from is that critical thinking it's rewarded. It's not, there's no attempt, and people think about this, you watch Full Metal Jacket, here, choke yourself with my hand, and you get told what to do and how to do it and how much time you have to do it. People think that critical thinking has no place in the military, but where I came from, that's what we're looking for, is people who are able to critically think. So we would have political arguments, religious arguments, philosophical arguments in the team room, and then come together and go do exactly what it is that our nation expected us to do. So you're going to get both. There are people who are conservative and liberal, Republican and Democrat, and everything in between. So I wish I could give you a very precise answer, but I have heard every spectrum of answer, from this is awesome to this is stupid.
What confuses me, I've heard different opinions on Assad, whether Assad is evil, whether he's gassed his citizens, or whether or not he's a victim of propaganda, some mass smear campaign. I'm like, whoa, this is way past my pay grade.
I've heard the same thing, and it's beyond mine as well, too.
It's frustrating because, when you don't know whether or not this is some propaganda or this is a real threat, or whether, whether it's something like the Saddam Hussein situation where, yes, he was an evil dictator, but also removing him might create a power vacuum, like Libya.
Did create a power vacuum. Yep.
And Gaddafi with Libya. I mean, Libya is a horrific example of that, right?
Yeah. And I don't know the long-term solution to those problems. It's, like I said, I spend enough of my waking hours truly questioning whether or not anything that I was involved in made my family or your family or Jamie's family safer. Did my actions erode what the rest of the world thinks about the United States of America? And I mean, I float back and forth. I think it had an impact in the moment. I think it had an impact stopping the water coming out of the dam. I think it was essential that it needed to be done. But I don't know if any of that has an impact beyond that time period that it occurred.
How much does it help you in talking about this stuff to give you a perspective? Like, I know Cleared Hot, your podcast,
Yep.
You're very active with that. How much does that help you flesh these ideas out and have conversations about them?
One of the most cathartic things that I do is talk on the podcast about these topics. So, and I'll do a mix between guests and Q&A. And guess what people ask me about? They want to know about war, and they want to know about that stuff. And it forces me to sit there and truly gauge the depth of my beliefs and then answer the questions for myself as to why do I believe this. It is by far one of the most cathartic things that I have done, is the ability to sit down and reflect. And I mean, I'm pretty honest about, if people ask me about killing, I'll talk about killing. If people ask me about mistakes, I'll tell you the worst mistakes that I ever made. Parenting, relationship with my wife, military, fill in the blank. So it's been huge. And to be honest, you know this. I owe the suggestion from you to starting that podcast. I owe you a huge thank you for giving me that nudge.
Well, you're so good. You were great on my podcast. I just knew you would do great at it. Yeah, I don't know. I probably have said to too many people, you should start a podcast. But it's worked with so many, with Jocko.
Phenomenal. And I bet you it's cathartic for him as well, too. I haven't asked him about it, but I would suspect that it's the same thing. Yeah.
He's a unique human. He's an American treasure.
He should go in a time capsule right next to Jerry, number one.
He really should, man. He's something special. But it's also like, in terms of motivation, he's a mindset alterer. Like, you hear the way he discusses things and thinks about things, and if you can adopt those ideas and put them into your own head, you really can shift who you are and how you move through this world.
If you can adopt a fraction of his ideas, or it'll change your philosophy. There are some people that I see go they seem to be searching, and they just want to dive in. It's like, maintain some of yourself and adopt as much of that as you possibly can, because you can go too far in anything. But yeah, the stuff that he's doing, and the number of people, the number of times his name comes up in a positive manner, it's unbelievable. And I listened to the JRE where you're like, you know what, Jocko? I'm going to tell you something that I think I've said too much. You should start a podcast.
Well, Goggins is another one. Goggins just being a guest on this podcast. I know he hasn't started his own podcast, but one thing he did do is, if you listen to Goggins' audiobook, in his audiobook, he has the book itself, which is read by another guy,
Yep.
and then him and that guy discuss various chapters in the book and discuss the real events that led to these different things and how he felt about them. So it's a podcast wrapped up in a book, and it's excellent.
So much better than just reading, chapter and verse.
Yes.
All that additional information and all the breadth and depth that you can gather from that.
Yeah.
It's an incredible medium. I don't know, I think I told you this. I had never listened to a podcast before I came on yours, so I didn't.
Well, we went a little crazy on that one, and
I talked a touch about Guantanamo Bay, but I still would say the same thing. I just maybe would have been more educated about the breadth and depth of your podcast. I didn't realize and again, I'm a fraction in comparison to other podcasts out there, but even the volume of response that I get to mine, it's unbelievable. The number of people who are consuming this type of medium is mind-blowing.
Well, it's free, which is great, and it's easy. You get it on your phone instantly, so you could be in your car, your phone is Bluetoothed up to your car, and you say, oh, there's a new cleared hot. Bam, you press play, it starts playing.
Yeah.
And because, essentially it's audio is not that it's not that big a file. It can stream really easily over 4G, like instantaneously. Yep. It's amazing. It's just to have everything free and instantly accessible like that. So if you're a truck driver, if you're driving long distances for work, or if you're traveling on a plane,
and you can scroll, pick your topic.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you want to learn about? There's podcasts out there for it, whatever it is.
For anything. There's crime podcasts, and there's comedy podcasts, and politics, and technology. It's like, it's never ending. And there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them, and they're all free.
Yeah.
It's an amazing medium, and it's also a medium with a very low gate of entry. Like, it's not difficult to jump over that gate or to get through. All you need is an account somewhere, and you can do. I've done a bunch of them just with my iPhone, just using the voice recorder application from Voice Notes from a iPhone. Record it, and then I'll send it to Jamie, and Jamie will upload them. Like, we've done a bunch of them on planes, where just me and Tony Hinchcliffe have sat on a plane and we have a couple of cocktails, start talking shit into the iPhone.
Into the phone.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then that reaches 1 million people.
Yeah, I mean, $400. You could start a podcast for $400.
Yeah,
you get a recording device and some way to gather the sound, and you're off and running.
Yeah, and there's so many people out there with unique perspectives, like you, like Jocko, there's hundreds of them. It's just it's an exciting time. Exciting time for the medium. Well, listen. We did fucking 3 hours. How crazy is that? It's almost 4 o'clock.
It always feels like 90 minutes.
I know. Well, it's a time warp in this room, man. There's something weird. I think it's this table. Something going on. It seems to be it. Andy, I love you, buddy.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you, man. Andy Stumpf, ladies and gentlemen. Cleared Hot Podcast available everywhere. Go get it. Bye.